All right, we are live. Wow, what a beautiful day. We had a beautiful conversation with one of our, first of all, a nice conversation with a friend. A lot of pattern recognition, a lot of connecting the dots. Then I had a good conversation with a friend from 2 years ago. And this was, again, very interesting. Like, we were chatting about how live streams have become a way for me to put myself out so much in long form, so much raw content that first of all it is extremely boring and it's not going to show up in the mainstream feed at all. But then but for people who really care about their YouTube, who are really going down certain rabbit holes, who really care about down certain rabbit holes, who really care about going down into certain topics deeply, their YouTube algorithm, and care about crafting their algorithm, their YouTube algorithm will try to show my content to them. I'm also really curious, like who, like this I think this month or whatever, I forgot, like YouTube Studio was like, it's also really cool. Like now that you have Gemini integrated inside the YouTube Studio, you can ask it very specific questions that, hey, I don't give a shit about all these metrics. Just tell me what am I doing right? Like when you ask it very high level questions like this, it gives you really good responses. It's like, hey, for people who actually end up clicking on your stream, they are finding your content valuable. They end up watching it. Yeah, your thumbnail is shit, but after people find your content, it's actually very interesting. So I think Gemini Studio is also, or Gemini in YouTube Studio is amazing work, especially for someone like me, because I don't give a shit about these metrics, the CTR, CTA, all that stuff. What I really care about is that am I able to find the right people who are aligned with this kind of content, who are kind of it's not even the content, it's mean about the relationships that we could be building. It's about putting your thoughts out there so much that you are able to find the right people, you are able to find the right friends, and then you are able to hang out with them. And this is exactly what happened right now. But this time I didn't even know, like I had this one friend, I kept bumping into him at Equinox, at our gym, at my previous gym, and I kept bumping into him, and we did one workout together, we talked a little bit, and he was interested in AI, and I would talk to him about AI, I would tell him certain things, and I think he just felt that he is not having that same conversation with people around AI in the gym. So, and maybe in Vancouver, but I don't know. So it was very funny that we were finally talking. We were finally talking, and then I just messaged him that, hey, let's go. And it was during this stream that I had this idea that let me message him to go for coffee or go for lunch. And then I messaged him. We went for lunch, and we had a really interesting conversation. And this conversation was all around the things that I am actually interested in. And also, we just updated the title. I think it's also a very interesting question. I was very curious about this, that a lot of people are finding the stream, a lot of people are watching it, but what I really care is I really want to know what draws you specifically in. What is specifically drawing you in? I know there's a certain reason why some of my family members are watching, my younger siblings are watching. They just love me. They just wanna watch what's happening. But then I'm really curious that what is attracting my friends, what is attracting other people when they watch this, what is drawing them in. And today when I was talking to this one friend, I was like, okay, I think there is this one question I would be really curious about, that, yeah, what draws you in? And it's not even what draws you in. So he mentioned, I asked him two questions. I asked one question. I think Abhi might be watching this, but hey, Abhi, if you're watching this. But yeah, Abhi, one thing he mentioned. So first question that I asked him was, if you had to explain what I'm doing to another friend, how would you explain it? And one thing he said is that life, abstract thoughts, musings, and then he just says stream of consciousness. And exactly. And when I read stream of consciousness, I'm like, this sounds cool. I should just name my title or update my bio and everything to live stream of consciousness. Live stream of consciousness. That's pretty cool. Live stream of consciousness. Live stream of consciousness. Pretty cool. And then he said something interesting. Young people are going through this collective awakening, which I thought was pretty cool. Prashant is thinking. Okay. Is this true that young people around the world are going through collective awakening? Okay, the weather today is very interesting. I think I'm getting a little bit sick. But anyways, again, he said young people are going through this collective awakening. People haven't really thought deeply about AI and other topics. Following your nose, rabbit holes, asking questions to AI. Very interesting. I think this is again like there's this certain thing that happens when you spend a lot of time on your craft. When you spend a lot of time on your craft to the outer world might be very boring, very simple. But the way you think is very attractive. And that is the same thing we are seeing happening around. Like I keep seeing this again and again. Like one example would be Mr. Beast. I don't know what is this effect. There should be a term for this. We'll ask Claude. There should be a term for this. Even for Mr. Beast, I'm not watching Mr. Beast videos. They are stupid. They're dumb for me. But I like the way he thinks. So it's cool to actually hear him on a podcast, on someone else's podcast, rather than him on his own work. Let's see. But yeah, maybe I'm just not the target audience. So it does make sense. The content itself is not speaking to me. This isn't working right now. You can try again. Okay. Help me figure out what is, if there's a term for this. If there is a term, cancel all of that. Help me understand if there is a term for this. There's a term for this feeling, this concept where the idea, where the work, the craft of an artist might be boring, but that artist himself is very interesting, and talking to him about his thoughts and learning about his thoughts would be much more interesting than his work. It's sometimes fun to just give Claude a lot of context about how you're thinking, because then it will actually come up with even richer response. I don't know, I like it. Also, I think this angle just makes things much more richer, much better. Because earlier we had a very traditional setup, like straight to a wall, very aligned, and that's not fun. I think having an angle is pretty cool. Having an angle is really cool. Also, a lot of interesting things are happening where you keep connecting a bunch of dots. We keep connecting a bunch of interesting dots. I was talking to my friend about this concept about don't look at the wall. So I was at Whistler, we were skiing, and after riding the bunnies once or twice, I am at a bar, and I'm just like, okay, let me now actually search how to ski. And I'm like, hey ChatGPT, just give me top insights, the best things, the 80-20 Pareto principle. What should I know if I have to ski? And one of the things it says to me is that your skis, look where you want your skis to go. Or where you see is where your skis will go. Something like that, in a very rhyming, poetic way. And I thought that was very interesting. And I started experimenting with that. You come down and you were like, oh, I keep looking into the trees where I don't want to go. I keep looking down, way down. I don't want to go straight because I think I'm going to fall. So it's very important that you're going to go through these curves. And you want to look at those curves. And the moment you want to turn, look on the other side where you want to go, not into the trees, not down, because wherever you look, you will go. And again, if you are on the side of a hill, if you are on the side, like, I don't know how to explain, but if you're a side on a hill and you want to go here, but if you're looking down, you will fall because your body is very misaligned. Your body wants to go here, but your eyes are down, so you're going to fall. You're going to fall on your side. So Very interesting. And then I hear Matthew Wesley on a podcast, and he talks about this concept of don't look at the wall, which is there's this race car driver, and he's driving on a racetrack. On both the sides you have the wall, and then you have the car, and obviously you are only seeing the wall. When you have to take a turn, you're only seeing the wall. But don't look at the wall, because if you will look at the wall, you will go into the wall. So it's important to look where you want to go. And similarly, if you extrapolate to your life, it's all about, if you look at the wall, if you look at the problems in your life, if you think too much about the problems in your life, if you think too much about the fears of what you don't want to happen, all that stuff, then that's exactly what's going to happen. So it's better to look where you want to go. It's better to pick a thing where you actually want to go, and then go towards that. Very interesting. Okay. Also, today we just got a response from Orpheum Theatre about Vancouver AI Film Festival, and this is very interesting because they have a rent cost of $22,000 for that one day from 8 a.m. to midnight. There are certain rules over there, and then there's a crew charges on top of it. Very, very interesting stuff. But this is gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun. We'll make it happen. All right. So that was the first question that I asked my friend. And the second question I asked him was, he said, amazing synchronicity, muscle of being creative. He has started Substack, flow state. Again, I was talking to my friend, and I wanted to mention him the Stephen Kotler thing, that what we are truly chasing is that flow state. And flow state gives us a lot of those emotions that we as humans want. We want deep engagement. We want excitement. We want a bit of relaxedness. Whoa, I don't know how to say that. We want a little bit of we want to feel relaxed. We want to feel that we are progressing. A lot of those ideas, a lot of those emotions that we are feeling, what a lot of those drugs do is short circuit that. They are like, oh, in your brain, there is this one thing, one hormone or not hormone, or one place in one spot in your brain which if stimulated can trigger this emotion. So instead of you going out in the world and doing this thing, if I just go into your brain and stimulate and add a lot of stimulation to this certain part of your brain, I can make you feel exactly what you want to feel. And it's very interesting. I think this was one of the exercises that Chris Williamson was talking about, that, okay, if you just want to feel blissed, if you just want to feel at bliss, or if you want to feel blissful, okay, I can create a machine or whatever. I think this was Nawal on Chris Williamson, and he was talking about this bliss idea, that if your goal was to just feel bliss, I can create this machine that just triggers, that just stimulates that bliss mechanism in your brain, so you will feel bliss. Is that all you want? And you're like, no. What I also really want is the story. What I also really want is everything that comes with it. It's not just the feeling of bliss. Just the feeling of bliss will be boring. I want to feel everything around it. I want to feel the challenge. I want to feel the emotions. I want to feel the challenge. I want to feel the emotions. I want to feel yeah. I want to feel the challenge. I want to feel the emotions. I want to have a story to tell, a unique story to tell. I want the people around me, I think I already said relationships. But yeah, I want everything that comes with it. I don't want the artificial thing. So yeah. I think people will quickly realize that AI, again, the same thing applies to AI, that AI is not the end. AI is the means. What happened in this world is that I was talking to this friend about this Hindi word called bhatakna. Bhatakta hua. Bhatakna. What is bhatakna? Bhatakna literally means like you are lost or you are distracted. But in this beautiful sense that we are using, in this beautiful context that we are using, it means you are illusioned by the Maya of this world. We're reading too much Upanishads and we're talking Maya now, or illusion, just illusion by the world. But yeah, Actually, I want to go deeper into the Upanishads. I think Upanishads, again, it's not a book that you have to read cover to cover. It's very interesting. Like some books which are more like pillar books, you sometimes just want to keep them around, and sometimes just like turn over a page and be like, okay, let me read one line over here. So what does it say? He is the source of all the powers of life. He is the Lord of all, the great seer who dwells forever in the cosmic womb. May he purify our consciousness. Everybody's talking about consciousness. Everybody's talking about consciousness. Yeah. I think it's also interesting. Like Twitter is also interesting. X is also interesting because it has moved from being just a public town square to a collective consciousness where everybody brings about their art, their work. What are they really good at? What are they truly thinking? And bring that together to add flavor and help everybody move forward. What AI is truly doing is that removing a lot of the obstacles in life, because we have a lot of obstacles. There are a lot of things, a lot of little things that we are illusioned by, but also the obstacles, we need those obstacles, because those obstacles, when you go through the hardships, you truly think about that, oh, this was helpful in getting me where I am. So that is really cool. Okay. This is a rich concept, and I don't think there's a one single definitive tone, but there are several works and thinkers that orbit exactly this tension. Let me walk through the landscape. The most direct articulation might be Oscar Wilde's famous line, I have put my genius into my life. I have put my genius into my life. I have put only my talent into my works. That's the concept distilled into a sentence. The artist as more luminous than the art. Wow. I have put my genius into my life. I have put only my talents into my work. Very cool. I think the fact that Claude can do this is amazing. This is what you want to use ChatGPT and OpenAI, like you want to use ChatGPT, you want to use all the LLMs for that. Think about an abstract thought, and there is another human who is older, wiser than you, has gone through those experiences, and they could formulate that feeling better for you than you could have done yourself. There's also an importance is formulating that thing by yourself before you read someone else's interpretation. But also it's good to like build on the shoulder of giants. Like now that I know what Oscar Wilde is saying, this is very interesting. I have put my genius into my life. I have put only my talent into my works. Very interesting. Now I'm curious. Tell me about how he crafted his life. How did he put genius into his life? Give me very specific details. Now I'm curious. Cyril Connolly's Enemies of Promise is probably the closest thing to a dedicated exploration. Connolly was himself the embodiment of this, a man universally regarded as the most brilliant conversationalist and literary mind of his generation, whose actual published output never matched. Wow. Cyril Connolly, Enemies of Promise. Universally regarded as the most brilliant conversationalist and literary mind of his generation, whose actual published output never matched the electricity of being in his presence. The book examines why promising artists fail to produce their best work and implicitly raises the question, what if the person is the work? Claude is much better at this. I don't think ChatGPT can talk like this. ChatGPT is very much like, hey, you want me to buy groceries? I will buy groceries for you. ChatGPT will buy groceries for you. Claude will give you some flavor. Claude will add some flavor. Okay, nice. Wow, that's pretty good. The book examines why promising artists fail to produce their best work and implicitly raises the question, what if the person is the work? Boswell's Life of Samuel Johnson is a canonical proof of the concept. Johnson wrote a dictionary and some essays, but Boswell's record of Johnson talking, his wit, his contradictions, his volcanic personality is what endures. The biography eclipsed the bibliography. Huh. Boswell's life of Samuel Johnson. I think this is again the presence. The presence is so much more important. Again, going back to Upanishads, it's the same thing, that the words, maybe like we just read, like he has all the power. Let's say we read like this one line. The words might not be that important. As important is the entire thing, which is the music, the musicality of this music, of, I don't know what's the technical term over here, but yeah, the musicality is much more important. The musicality is much more important. The presence is much more important. The song is much more important. Like having that thing running in your brain is much more important, because you are not just reading a code that makes you feel blissful or happy for 1 minute. It's more like it's a reminder. It's again like similar thing goes for Founders Podcast. Founders Podcast, he pretty much talks about the same thing. Like every time he hangs out with his friends, or every time he reads these books, he can pretty much, now that he has read so many books, he can pretty much figure out the common pattern over here. And the common pattern, reading that again and again, you just realize that what you are doing for yourself is just you are reminding yourself what matters, what is important, stuff like that. Because there's no new information. There is new information, but if you remove all the flavor, the flavor just reminding you to do the most important thing. Wow. That's similar to food as well. We add all this flavor so we actually eat the food. And what is the food? The food is protein, carbs. Those things are important. And we make it palatable by adding more flavor to it. So flavor actually helps us eat the most important things that we need. And what the modern industry has done is that modern industry has mistook the flavor as the food itself. So it started selling candies and chocolates and gummies because it mistook flavor as the food. Wow. Okay. That was good. That's also very interesting. That is also very interesting. And I think that's the reason why it would be really funny if David Senra actually ends up doing something like this, which is like actual church. If he actually takes over a church and calls and take it over and be like, this is the church for founders. And like founders actually show up over there and they are like sitting in silence, and there's a David Senra podcast playing over there. One of the 1 hour podcast is playing, and that's the sermon of the day. Or David Senra live is reading something. Actually live, we don't know if live would be fun. Live could be fun, yeah. David Senra is like literally standing over there. This would be a really fun thing to do. That would be a really fun thing to do. He should do it. I can only imagine like a big church. Churches are amazing. I was in Montreal and I went to these couple churches, and it is absolutely beautiful to be in those environments which are crafted for aesthetics and beauty and prayer. It's amazing. When you go to places like that, you realize that, yeah, the modern buildings we have taken out the soul from them. We have to inject soul again because we took out the soul. Oh my God. As I'm saying this, I'm looking at all these modern buildings and I'm realizing that, yeah, okay, very interesting. Cyril Connolly is probably the closest thing to a dedicated exploration. Connolly was himself the embodiment of this, a man universally regarded as the most brilliant conversationalist and literary mind of his generation. His actual published output never matched the electricity of being in his presence. The book examines why promising artists fail to produce their best work and implicitly raises the question, what if the person is the work? Life of Samuel Johnson is the canonical proof of the concept. Johnson wrote a dictionary and some essays, but Boswell's record of Johnson talking, his wit, his contradictions, his volcanic personality is what endures. The biography eclipsed the bibliography. A few other threads worth pulling. Nietzsche argued that Every great philosophy is the personal confession of its author. Nietzsche argued that every great philosophy canonical proof of the concept. Johnson wrote a dictionary in some essays. His wit, his contradictions, his volcanic personality is what endures. The biography eclipsed the bibliography. Every great philosophy is the personal confession of its author. The thinker is inseparable from and often more interesting than the system. Given your Nietzschean interest, this might resonate most. Actually, this reminds me, why is my Nietzsche book not here? We'll just pull up my Nietzsche book. Boom. Okay, we found the Nietzsche book, The Gay Science. Very funny name. Let's read one thing from it. Of the garrulousness of writers. I don't know what that word means. There's a garrulousness of wrath frequently encountered in Luther as well as Schopenhauer. Garrulousness due to a superabundant supply of conceptual formulations as in Kant. It's crazy to have analyzed the works of human beings so deeply that you can write another deep 400-page book on it. Wow. Due to the delight in ever new twists of the same thing to be found in Montaigne, a garrulousness of spiteful characters. Anyone who reads contemporary publications will recall two writers of this type. A garrulousness due to the delight in good words and language forms not at all rare in Goethe's prose. A garrulousness due to an inner pleasure in noise and confused emotions, for example in Carlyle. Joyless. A single joyless person is enough to create constant discouragement and cloudy skies for a whole household. And it is a miracle if there is not one person like that. Happiness is not nearly so contagious a disease. Why? Happiness is not nearly so contagious a disease. Work an artist. This artist is ambitious, nothing more. Ultimately, his work is merely a magnifying glass that he offers everybody who looks his way. This artist is ambitious, nothing more. Ultimately, his work is merely a magnifying glass that he offers everyone who looks his way. Origin of good and bad. Improvements are invented only by those who can feel that something is not good. Whoa. This artist is ambitious, nothing more. Ultimately, his work is merely a magnifying glass that he offers everybody who looks his way. Magnifying glass who looks his way. Thoughts and words. Even one's thoughts one cannot reproduce entirely in words. Even one's thoughts one cannot reproduce entirely in words. Habit. Every habit lends our hand more wit, but makes our wit less handy. Books. What good is a book that does not even carry us beyond all books? Whoa. The sigh of the search for knowledge. Oh my greed, there is no selflessness in my soul, but only an all-coveting self that would like to appropriate many individuals as so many additional pairs of eyes and hands. A self that would like to bring back the whole past true and that will not lose anything that it could possibly possess. Oh, my greed is a flame. Oh, that I might be reborn in 100 beings. Whoever does not know the sigh from first-hand experience does not know the passion of the search for knowledge. The denial of chance. No victor believes in chance. Very cool, very cool. So Nietzsche is amazing, obviously. I mean, amazing in the way that a person who has deeply thought about things, and it's like it's interesting when you come across people whose work you cannot understand clearly at the first go, but it definitely has a lot of meaning to it. You know that, okay, you know that there is something over here. It's just that on the first go, I didn't understand it. So you might have, you definitely have thought deeper about this. Every great philosophy is the personal confession of its author. The thinker is inseparable from and often more interesting than the system. Given your niche and interest, this might resonate most. Kierkegaard's Ether. Explore the aesthetic life, people who make their existence the artwork rather than producing external artifacts. Wow, okay. The aesthetic life, people who make their existence the artwork rather than producing external artifacts. And in your own tradition, the Guru-Shishya dynamic in Vedantic thought is essentially this principle formalized. The Guru's darshan, their presence and conversation, is the transmission. The Guru-Shishya dynamic in Vedantic thought is essentially this principle formalized. The Guru's darshan, their presence and conversation, is the transmission. The texts they leave behind are considered lesser echoes of what it was to sit with them. The texts they leave behind are considered lesser echoes of what it was to sit with them. The Upanishads themselves are literally sitting near, the proximity to the thinker mattering more than any fixed output. This is really cool. This is talking exactly about this idea. Guru Shishya, Upanishads. The Guru's darshan, their presence and conversation, is the transmission. The texts they leave behind are considered lesser echoes of what it was to sit with them. The Upanishads themselves are literally sitting near, the proximity to the thinker mattering more than any fixed output. Tell me about how he crafted his life. How did he put genius into his life? Give me very specific details. Okay, here's a specific anatomy of how Wilde made his life the masterwork. The entrance as art form. Wilde understood that how you arrive somewhere is a creative act. When he stepped off the boat in New York in 82, customs asked if he had anything to declare. He just replied, "Nothing but my genius." Oh my God. Yes. Yeah, this is exactly what we need to do. When you declare at customs, you're like, do you have anything to declare? Nothing but my genius. Wasn't spontaneous. He had actually been flat and underwhelming with the reporters on the boat, and he knew he needed to recover. So the customs line was a composed performance, a correction. Our civilization. Anecdotes. Do you have anything to declare? His reply, nothing but my genius. And it worked. Few remarks on history travel as widely or quickly as that one. He treated the moment of crossing a threshold the way a playwright treats an opening line. Conversation as his primary medium. This is the big one. George Bernard Shaw called him incomparably the greatest talker of his time, perhaps of all time. What's crucial is how he talked. Unlike the famous talkers before him, Coleridge, Macaulay, Carlyle, who were essentially lecturers, monologists, holding court on pet subjects and generally regarded as bores, Wilde never monopolized conversation. He took the ball of talk wherever it happened to be at the moment and played with it. He was a jazz musician, not a classical performer. He riffed. Wow. Wow. Oscar Wilde. Show me pictures of Oscar Wilde. It's funny to talk to ChatGPT like this. Show me pictures. Cloudbot. We need Cloudbot. Yeah. Show me pictures. Show me this. Book my details. This is exactly how AI is supposed to work now. Oscar Wilde. Here are some classic historical photos of Oscar Wilde, the famed Irish writer and wit, captured in elegant Victorian era portraits from archives and public collections. Wilde and Taylor. Oscar Wilde reminds me of too many people. He looks like a lot of people that I know. Okay. who were essentially lecturers, monologists. Coleridge, Macaulay, Carlyle, who were essentially lecturers, monologists, holding court on pet subjects and generally regarded as bores. Wilde never monopolized the conversation. He took the ball of talk wherever it happened to be at the moment and played with it. He was a jazz musician, not a classical performer. He riffed. There's an incredible detail from Frank Harris's biography. After one lunch, a group of hard Yorkshire businessmen, not literary types at all, begged the host to immediately arrange a dinner so they could hear Wilde again. One of them, Grim Thorpe, later said he couldn't remember a single specific thing Wilde said. All he could describe it as was a play of genial humor over every topic that came up, like sunshine dancing on waves. Oh my god. Am I taking inspiration from Oscar Wilde? Am I inspired? Because we literally just had a conversation. We literally had 2 conversations today. And I don't know why it sounds like exactly this. Why it sounds exactly like this. Okay. There's an incredible detail from Frank Harris's biography. After one lunch, a group of hard Yorkshire businessmen, not literary types at all, begged the host to immediately arrange a dinner so they could hear Wilde again. One of them, Grimthorpe, later said he couldn't remember a single specific thing Wilde said. All he could describe it as was a play of genial humor over every topic that came up, like sunshine dancing on waves. That's extraordinary. The effect was so total that it transcended the content. The experience of being near him was the thing. The experience of being near him was the thing. All he could describe it as was. All he could describe it as was a play of genial humor over every topic that came up, like sunshine dancing on waves. That extraordinary. The effect was so total that it transcended the content. The experience of being near him was the thing. The costume as philosophy. At Oxford, he adopted velvet breeches, tailcoats, silk stockings. When he toured America, he wore an aesthetic costume of velvet jacket, knee breeches. At Oxford, he adopted velvet breeches, tailcoats, silk stockings. When he toured America, he wore an aesthetic costume of velvet jacket, knee breeches, and black silk stockings. Deliberately provocative, because the reporters who met him expected a frail aesthete and instead found a physical giant whose fist looked formidable. The contradiction was the point. He was performing a thesis about beauty in a body that could also knock you out. The costume as philosophy. Generosity as performance. When a beggar accosted him in the Haymarket, claiming he had no work and no bread, Wilde responded, "Work? Why should you want to work? And bread? Why should you eat bread?" Then he put his hand on the man's shoulder and said warmly, "Now, if you had come to me and said that you had work to do but you couldn't dream of working, and that you had bread to eat but you couldn't think of eating bread, I would have helped you gladly." Work. Why should you want to work? And bread. Why should you eat bread? Now, if you had come to me and said that you had work to do but you couldn't dream of working, and that you had bread to eat but you couldn't think of eating bread, I would have helped you gladly. He turned charity into a philosophical lesson about the aesthetics of asking. What did he mean by that? The trial as his final masterpiece, when prosecuted for homosexuality and asked to explain the love that dare not speak its name, he gave an impromptu speech characterizing it as a great affection of an elder for a younger man, such as Plato made the very basis of his philosophy, and such as you find in the sonnets of Michelangelo and Shakespeare. It is that deep spiritual affection that is as pure as it is perfect. A great affection of an elder for a younger man, such as Plato, made the very basis of his philosophy, and such as you find in the sonnets of Michelangelo and Shakespeare. It is that deep spiritual affection that is as pure as it is perfect. The courtroom erupted in applause. He was composing in real time under existential threat and produced something more beautiful than anything in his plays. A great affection of an elder for a younger man, such as Plato, made the very basis of his philosophy, and such as you find in the sonnets of Michelangelo and Shakespeare. It is that deep spiritual affection that is as pure as it is perfect. Crucial thing for the concept you're exploring, Prashant. Wilde knew this was happening. He didn't accidentally fail to put his genius into his works. He treated art as the supreme reality and life as a mere mode of fiction. He treated art as the supreme reality. He treated art as the supreme reality and life as a mere mode of fiction, which meant his actual life became the canvas where fiction's rules applied. He lived as if he were a character he was writing, but with real stakes, which is what made it genius rather than mere performance. Actual life became the canvas where the fiction's rules applied. He lived as if he were a character he was writing, but with real stakes, which is what made it genius rather than mere performance. The tragic proof: after prison destroyed him, he was broken, died at just 46. And the Oscar Wilde myth, the life, has generated more books, plays, and films than his actual literary output ever could have on its own. The work survived, but the life consumed. And the Oscar Wilde myth, the life, has generated more books, plays, and films than his actual literary output ever could have on its own. It's a layered bit of philosophy disguised as a joke. Here's what he's really doing. The beggar's pitch is, I lack things, I have no work, no bread. Give me money so I can get them. It's a plea rooted in scarcity. I'm missing the basics of survival. Wilde is saying that's the wrong problem. The truly interesting that's the wrong problem. He's like, hey, you're operating in the wrong problem space over here. You gotta expand. You gotta expand your problem. He's like acting like there's a guy who just pitched him on a YC startup, and he's like, no. You're thinking of the wrong problem space. You gotta think about this bigger TAM, bigger total addressable market. The truly interesting and tragic human condition isn't lacking bread. It's having bread and finding it meaningless. Oh my God. Wilde is saying that's the wrong problem. The truly interesting and tragic human condition isn't lacking bread. It's having bread and finding it meaningless. It's not the absence of work that makes you suffer. It's the presence of work you can't bring yourself to care about. Oh my God. That's the wrong problem. The truly interesting and tragic human condition isn't lacking bread. It's having bread and finding it meaningless. It's about the absence of work that makes you suffer. It's the presence of work you can't bring yourself to care about. He's making a distinction between material poverty and existential poverty. So what did he say? He said, if you had come to me and said that you had work to do but you couldn't dream of working, and that you had bread to eat but you couldn't think of eating bread, I would have helped you gladly. The beggar is describing an economic problem. Wilde wants to hear a spiritual problem. The person who has everything they need and still can engage with life. That, to Wilde, is a real affliction worth addressing. He's making a distinction between material poverty and existential poverty. The beggar is describing an economic problem. Wilde wants to hear a spiritual problem. The person who has everything they need and still can engage with life, that to Wilde is a real affliction worth addressing. There's also something deeply subversive about it. Victorian charity was built on the deserving poor, people who wanted to work but couldn't find it. Wilde is flipping that entirely. He's saying the person I respect, the person I would actually open my wallet for, is the one who refuses the script, the one who says, I have bread, but I reject the premise that eating it is the point. That's someone who has confronted the absurdity of existence rather than just its economics. Wow. There's also something deeply subversive about it. Victorian charity was built on the deserving poor, people who wanted to work but couldn't find it. Wilde is flipping that entirely. He's saying the person I respect, the person I would actually open my wallet for, is the one who refuses the script, the one who says, I have bread, but I reject the premise that eating it is the point. Eating it is the point. That's someone who has confronted the absurdity of existence rather than just its economics. It's also honestly Wilde being a bit of a bastard. Aestheticizing someone's hunger to make a philosophical point. But that tension, whoa, I'm really surprised Claude used that word. Okay. But that tension is the whole Wilde package. He couldn't encounter any human moment without turning it into a stage for ideas. Even a hand on a beggar's shoulder became a seminar on the hierarchy of suffering. And if you think about it through a Vedantic lens, there's something familiar here. The difference between dukh as material suffering, dukh as material, wow. Dukh. We use dukh as just sadness. I'm sad, dukh. But dukh is material suffering, and dukh, between dukh as material suffering and dukh as the deeper dissatisfaction that persists even when material needs are met. Wow. Dukh as material suffering versus dukh, the deeper dissatisfaction that persists even when material needs are met. Wilde is essentially saying, come to me with your existential dukh, not your economic one. That's the conversation worth having. Wilde is essentially saying, come to me. Use voice mode. Hello, how are you? Oh, that's just transcription. Oh, it removed it. What just happened? I have no idea what just happened. Anyways, also this is looking ugly right now to me. We gotta fix something over here. We gotta do something with these names. Yes, we gotta make it much more beautiful. Dukh as the deeper dissatisfaction that persists even when material needs are met. Wilde is essentially saying, come to me with your existential dukh, not your economic one. That's the conversation worth having. This is really cool. Material poverty and existential poverty. The beggar is describing an economic problem. Wilde wants to hear a spiritual problem. The person who has everything they need and still can engage with life. That to Wilde is the real affliction worth addressing. There's also something deeply subversive about it. Give me top quotes from Oscar Wilde. On authenticity and mask, be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. Man is least himself when he talks in his own person. Give him a mask and he will tell you the truth. Man is least himself when he talks in his own person. Give him a mask and he will tell you the truth. Most people are other people. Their thoughts are someone else's opinions. Their lives a mimicry. Their passions a quotation. Wow. Wow. This reminds me, I think this is again very interesting because it's like, okay, when you go on Tinder, when you go on one of these dating apps and they are like, okay, so what are your hobbies? List 5 of them. And you are putting your hobbies. Now there are 500 of them to pick from. So first of all, you are picking and choosing that, okay, out of these 500 option analysis, which one do I truly like, right? Then as you start spending more time on the apps, you're realizing that, okay, these other people, these other individuals on this app, they also have certain things, which is very interesting. So you're slowly learning about them, that, oh, girls are putting that they like boba as a hobby, like drinking boba tea is a hobby, and you're like, okay, interesting. So you're learning, so you're like, and then you're like slowly like, oh, if I want to match with them, if I want Tinder to match us together, uh, and Tinder to show them the fact that, oh, you have like 5 common hobbies with this person, you start putting their hobbies in your profile. And then what happens is you start slowly adapting their adapting to these new hobbies. You're like, oh, no, now I actually like to drink boba. Why? Because I read this other girl was drinking boba and she had that on her profile. And why she had that? She just thought it was fun. She doesn't even like boba. So it's like, yeah, very, very interesting stuff starts to happen when it's like Schrodinger's cat, right? You act differently when you are being observed versus when you are not in observation. You act differently when you are under observation versus when you are not under observation. Most people are other people. Their thoughts are someone else's opinions. Their lives a mimicry. Their passions a quotation. Yeah, so when I read that, their passions a quotation, that reminds me of that. It also reminds me of the fact that there's this one guy who recently, Murray Hill Street, or Murray Hill guy, I think. He basically used pictures of one of his friends and created a Hinge profile, created a Tinder profile, and as an experiment. And then he got banned from Hinge, he got banned from Bumble, and he's just trying to show that how bad is the dating market today, and what these dating apps are doing to just keep making money and keep having you spend more and more time on the apps. So actually, let's look at it. What is the stock price of Match Group? So if you look at this today, let's see, if we do a 1 year, 5 year, and max, oh my god, it went from $159 to $30. So what is the market cap? What is their market cap? Why didn't you show market cap? Just add that line. Wow, market cap is like let's say it's 7.5. At max, it was 5 times that. So they are 5 times down right now. What is the reason for the stock price to be 5 times down its peak? Post-COVID user engagement, okay, subscriber decline. So this was during the COVID period. Okay, so during COVID, it was really high because people were using too much, and people were also just investing. So it's not even about were they using, it was just they were investing. Growth has slowed, some cases reversed, especially with Tinder, the flagship app. Paying user counts have fallen for consecutive quarters. Weaker user engagement has weighed on revenue expectations. Market repricing of risk and growth prospects. Competition and changing user behavior. Women in particular have shown fatigue with traditional swiping paradigms. Niche or alternative social platforms instead of paid dating subscriptions. Leadership shifts. re-engineer its growth playbook. Strategic changes which can temporarily depress share prices until execution proves out. Capital rotates into sectors like AI infrastructure and semiconductor growth drivers. Some consumer tech names are seeing less investor enthusiasm relative to their peak narrative. Slower subscriber growth, more modest revenue prospects, execution challenges, broader shifts in investor focus away from legacy app monetization toward newer tech growth themes, hyper-driven valuation to fundamentals-driven valuation. Interesting. So yeah, what we saw is, the Murray Hill guy, he was running this experiment. He basically showed that, hey, women are in fatigue. Like every minute they are getting a like, every minute they are getting a message. There is no way for a man to stand out. There is no way you can stand out. It is incredibly difficult. Okay. On these apps, man is least himself when he talks in his own person. Give him a mask. Most people are other people. Their thoughts are someone else's opinions. This is again true if you spend a lot of time on Twitter. What is happening over here is that your thoughts are you're just generating your thoughts from other people that you are reading. You're generating your thoughts. Your thoughts are basically thoughts of other people that you just read on Twitter. Their lives are mimicry, their passions a quotation. Society often forgives the criminal. It never forgives the dreamer. Society often forgives the criminal, never forgives the dreamer. Wow. What did he mean by that? The only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about. So he's basically talking about love and hate are the same emotions. The opposite, he's talking about the fact that the opposite of love is not hate, the opposite of love is indifference. Love and hate basically means that people care. Indifference means nobody cares. Morality is simply the attitude we adopt towards people we personally dislike. Morality is simply the attitude we adopt towards people we personally dislike. Every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. Wow. Every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. Very cool. Hypocrisy. The hypocrisy of society. Wow. Very cool. On art and living. To live is the rarest thing in the world. Most people exist. That is all. To live is the rarest thing in the world. Most people exist. That is all. I have the simplest taste. I'm always satisfied with the best. I have the simplest taste. I'm always satisfied with the best. Life imitates art far more than art imitates life. No great artist ever sees things as they really are. If he did, he would cease to be an artist. No great artist ever sees things as they really are. If he did, he would cease to be an artist. To live is the rarest thing in the world. Most people exist, that is all. I have the simplest taste. I'm always satisfied with the best. It's very interesting. It's very interesting to go back and watch me on live stream because I think I'm so boring. The real interesting thing happens when, as I'm reading these things, the emotions that it makes me feel and the thoughts that it makes me go into, the thoughts that it triggers in my head, I think that is really cool. But obviously, I cannot talk about every single thought that just popped in my head when I read something, because these are like 5 different or 10 different thoughts, and my mouth can only go in one stream, but my brain works in parallel. So this is very cool. Society often forgives the criminal, it never forgives the dreamer. The only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about. Morality is this simply the attitude we adopt towards people you personally dislike. To live is the rarest thing in the world. Most people exist, that is all. I have the simplest taste. I'm always satisfied with the best. Life imitates art far more than art imitates life. No great artist ever sees things as they really are. If he did, he would cease to be an artist. Knowledge and wisdom. Nothing that is worth knowing can be taught. Nothing that is worth knowing can be taught. Experience is merely the name men gave to their mistakes. I had experiences. Wow. Wow. Experience is merely a knowledge and wisdom. Experience is merely the name men give to their mistakes. I had. It would be really funny to go on LinkedIn. Get your. Oh. Let's see. Let's go quickly on LinkedIn. I'll do a quick check. And we'll do a quick check over here. And let's see. Let's see if I come across someone's profile. Let's say I came across this person's profile right now. Okay, I'll share the screen now. Let's say I came across this person's profile, Ali Kite Mechanic. Okay, and now, Tina Healthcare, pursuing Doctor of Philosophy. Pursuing Doctor of Philosophy is very interesting when someone says I'm pursuing, like that's a full form of PhD. Doctor, PhD. What's CH? Oh, philosophy. Doctor of Philosophy. But it's bioengineering and biomedical engineering. What does it mean? Pursuing Doctor of Philosophy. What is the true meaning of doing a PhD? WisprFlow is really good. Short answer. PhD isn't really about the subject. It's about how you relate to the unknown. Let's slow that down. Doesn't mean Plato or Nietzsche, though they are welcome. Love or wisdom. Doctor of Philosophy. Philo, Sophie. Philo, love. Philo, love. Sophie, wisdom. Sophie. It means love or wisdom, the disciplined pursuit of truth when the map runs out. The disciplined pursuit of truth when the map runs out. Doctor of Philosophy. Pursuing Doctor of Philosophy. PhD. Doctor of Philosophy. Very interesting. The disciplined pursuit of truth when the map runs out. Ask questions no one has asked before. Sit with uncertainty longer than most people can tolerate. Create new knowledge, not just learning existing knowledge. Defend that knowledge publicly under hostile questioning. The title is less expert and more licensed explorer of the unknown. Oh my God. Oh my God. I love this. Oh my God. This is really cool. Maybe we'll just change. Doctor of Philosophy. Okay. Update it to Okay, really cool. Really cool. All right. The real work of PhD that no brochure tells you. Epistemic humility, you learn how little you know. Then you learn how little anyone knows. Then you learn how easy it is to fool yourself. This is why PhDs often sound careful, precise, even annoying. They have seen how fragile truth actually is. Intellectual courage. A PhD forces you to choose a question with no guaranteed answer. Work on it alone for years, except that most days you're probably wrong. It's not brilliance, it's the willingness to be wrong in public repeatedly until you are less wrong. Intellectual courage. Number one was epistemic humility. Intellectual courage forces you to choose a question with no guaranteed answer, work on it alone for years, except that most days you're probably wrong. It's not brilliance, it's the willingness to be wrong in public repeatedly until you are less wrong. Taste. This is the quiet superpower. Intellectual courage, epistemic humility that you don't know, intellectual courage to go after something. Taste. This is the quiet superpower. You develop a sense for what questions are interesting versus trivial, what results matter versus noise, what elegance feels like in your field. This is why researchers can smell bad ideas instantly. Taste is trained through pain. Why the process feels so existential. The PhD strips away external validation, no grades, no gold stars, clear progress metrics, fast feedback loops. What remains is why am I doing this really? Many people think they are pursuing a topic. They are actually confronting their relationship with failure, their need for approval, their tolerance for ambiguity, their identity without structure. That's why PhDs often trigger identity crisis. What a PhD is not. It's not a prestige badge. That's a side effect, not the point. Proof of intelligence, job training. Sometimes it helps, often it doesn't. A guarantee of impact. You can do world-class work without a PhD. And many PhDs never do meaningful work. The degree is permission, not destiny. The deepest meaning, the part few articulate. A PhD is an apprenticeship in thinking from first principles. Apprenticeship in thinking from first principles. You learn to question assumptions before optimizing. Separate signal from status. Care more about being correct. Care more about being correct than being impressive. Build ideas that can survive criticism at its best. A PhD produces people who are dangerous to dogma, immune to shallow certainty, capable of original thought under pressure. At its worst, it produces very interesting. Very If no one, ask yourself, if no one ever recognizes work, would I still want to understand the answer? If yes, you are aligned with the spirit of a PhD. If no, that's not a moral failure. It just means your path is elsewhere. One last reframing. It's not about knowing more. It's about becoming someone who can responsibly say, I don't know yet, and I know how to find out. Love or wisdom. Philosophia. The disciplined pursuit of truth when the map runs out. Not possession, love of it, chasing it, courting it, losing sleep over it. So to pursue a PhD, literally say, I care enough about truth to be uncomfortable for years. Epistemic humility, intellectual courage, and taste. These are really important. I'll save them. Epistemic humility, intellectual courage, and taste. Nice. Okay. Really cool. Wow, I was here to do something totally different, but I ended up finding something very interesting. Philosophia. Trains you to see flaws others miss, notice uncertainty others smooth over, resist easy narratives, which is so. I think it's very interesting. When you say philosophy, philosophy has a connotation. People think about philosophy in a certain way, but when you say philosophia, that changes how people think about it. It makes people think that, oh, so what is this? It is not. It is philosophia. It is love of wisdom. Philosophia. Wow, very cool. I'm making changes on the go. Really cool. We're making changes on the go. Amazing. Okay. Nothing that is worth knowing can be taught. Experience is merely the name men give for their mistakes. Okay, I gotta do this. It's funny. This would be really funny. This would be really funny. Experience is merely the name men give to their mistakes. have an insatiable curiosity to know everything except what is worth knowing. The public have an insatiable curiosity to know everything. The public has an insatiable curiosity to know everything except what is worth knowing. Nowadays, people know the price of everything and the value of nothing. Wow. Nowadays, people know the price of everything, and the value of nothing, on love and desire. Yet each man kills the thing he loves. By each, let this be heard. Yet each man kills the thing he loves. By each, let this be heard. Some do it with a bitter look, some with a flattering word. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. Wow. This is also very interesting. This is very interesting. Like we talk about this, or we learn about this as you get into the relationship, or as you are in the early stage of a relationship, that tension, that mystery actually grows the romance. It's interesting. It makes you more attractive, and some people optimize for it. But that uncertainty is what generates romance, tension, attraction. Who being loved is poor? Who being loved is poor? Wow. So yeah, Oscar Wilde is turning the concept of rich. When people say rich, yeah, this is like Scott Galloway always ends his blog post with "life is rich." And this is exactly the same thing. Who being loved is poor. And this is the exact same thing. You want to be focused. Yeah, you're focused on the wrong side of being rich. The real side of being rich is people. It's being alive, relationships, being loved, loving and being loved. On suffering and depth, where there is sorrow, there is holy ground. Where there is sorrow, there is holy ground. To regret one's own experiences is to arrest one's own development. To regret one's own experiences is to arrest one's own development. To deny one's own experiences is to put a lie into the lips of one's own life. To regret one's own experiences is to arrest one's own development. To deny one's own experiences is to put a lie into the lips of one's own life. We are all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars. Yes, don't look at the wall. Look where you want to go. Look where you're going to go. We are all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars. The devastating one-liners. I can resist everything except temptation. I can resist everything except temptation. Work is the curse of the drinking classes. Work is the curse of the drinking classes. I have nothing to declare except my genius. The truth is rarely pure and never simple. The truth is rarely pure and never simple. A cynic is a man who knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. Is they almost work too well in isolation. They are so perfectly self-contained that people collect them like decorative objects. But what made them genius in context was that they were live ammunition. He deployed them in conversations in courtrooms, at customs desks. They weren't written to be framed. They were spoken to change the temperature of a room. Okay, what is this one? Society often forgives the criminal, it never forgives the dreamer. This one cuts deep Because it's not really about criminals or dreamers. It's about what threatens social order. A criminal breaks the rules that's actually manageable for society. The rules still exist. The criminal acknowledges their authority by violating them. You punish the criminal, you restore order, you feel righteous about it. Everyone moves on. The system actually needs criminals. They validate the whole framework. See, we caught the bad person, the rules work. A dreamer does something far more dangerous. They ignore the rules entirely. They propose a different game. They don't break the window. They suggest the building shouldn't exist. That's unforgivable because there's no mechanism to process it. You can't punish someone for imagining a different world. You can only exile them, mock them, or destroy them. A dreamer does something far more dangerous. They ignore the rules entirely. They propose a different game. They don't break the window. They suggest the building shouldn't exist. That's unforgivable because there is no mechanism to process it. You can't punish someone for imagining a different world. You can only exile them, mock them, or destroy them. And Wilde was speaking from lived experience. His plays were successful. His wit was celebrated. London loved him. Speaking from lived experience, his plays were successful. His wit was celebrated. London loved him, but the moment his actual life revealed that he was living by a completely different moral architecture, one where love between men was beautiful rather than criminal, society didn't just punish him, it erased him. His name was removed from playbills where his plays were still running to packed houses. People crossed the street to avoid his wife. His children's surname was changed. They could have forgiven a scandal. What they couldn't forgive was that he wasn't ashamed, that he stood in the courtroom and called it beautiful, that he dreamed it was legitimate. There's also a subtler read here. Society forgives the criminal because the criminal confirms the majority's moral superiority. There's also a subtler read here. Society forgives the criminal because the criminal confirms the majority's moral superiority. I would never do that. Confirms the majority's moral superiority. I would never do that. But the dreamer threatens something worse. They make the majority question whether their values are arbitrary. The criminal makes you feel safe. The dreamer makes you feel uncertain. And people will tolerate danger long before they will tolerate uncertainty. Wilde himself was both, technically convicted as a criminal, but actually destroyed for being a dreamer. The 2 years of hard labor were the criminal's punishment. The total social annihilation was the dreamer's. But actually destroyed for being a dreamer. The 2 years of hard labor were the criminal's punishment. The total social annihilation was the dreamer's. What punishment did Oscar Wilde get? Tell me about his later years of his life. One of the most dramatic falls in literary history, and the details are brutal. The trigger. It started with a misspelled insult. The same night, the importance of being earnest premiered to huge acclaim. The Marquis of Queensberry, father of Wilde's lover, Lord Alfred Douglas, left a calling card at Wilde's club addressed to Oscar Wilde posing sodomite. He couldn't even spell the accusation. Wilde, at the peak of his fame and arrogance, made the catastrophic decision to sue Queensberry for libel. The libel hearings unearthed evidence that caused Wilde to drop his charges and led to his own arrest and criminal prosecution for gross indecency with other males. He had walked into the courtroom as plaintiff and walked out as the accused. In the second trial, Wilde was convicted and sentenced to 2 years hard labor, the maximum penalty allowed by law. what hard labor actually meant. This wasn't just sitting in a cell and wall picking through old shipping ropes for flecks of tarred fiber to be used for waterproofing ships' hulls, work that was particularly brutal on prisoners' fingers and thumbs. This wasn't just sitting in a cell, it involved picking through old shipping ropes for flecks of tarred fiber to be used for waterproofing ships' hulls, work that was particularly brutal on prisoners' fingers and thumbs. The regime was formally described as hard labor, hard fare, and a hard bed. He started at Pentonville, then was moved to Wandsworth. At Wandsworth, he collapsed during chapel from illness and hunger, an injury that would eventually contribute to his death years later. Prisoners were not allowed to speak to each other, and outside their solitary cells were required to wear a cap with a thick veil so they wouldn't be recognized by the prisoners. He was then transferred to Reading Gaol, where he became prisoner C33, the occupant of the third cell on the third floor of C ward. Prisoners were identified only by their cell numbers and not by name, the lowest point. The transfer itself was perhaps the most humiliating moment. A crowd jeered and spat at him on the platform at Clapham Junction railway station. This was a man who weeks earlier had 2 hit plays running simultaneously in London's West End. De Profundis, a 50,000 word letter to Douglas that discusses his spiritual journey through his trials, a dark counterpoint to his earlier philosophy of pleasure. It contains some of his most piercing self-examination. One line that captures the transformation. The 2 great turning points of my life were when my father sent me to Oxford and when society sent me to prison. He also witnessed something that haunted him. A trooper named Charles Thomas Woolridge was brought to Reading, sentenced to death for murdering his wife, and hanged the first execution at Reading. In 18 years, this became the seed of the Ballad of Reading Gaol. Release and exile. On the day of his release, he caught the overnight steamer to France, never to return to Britain or Ireland. When he arrived at a friend's house in London that morning, Otto Leverson recorded that he walked in with the dignity of a king returning from exile, but the irony, as she knew, was that his real exile was just beginning. He went to Normandy first, wrote the Ballad of Reading Gaol, published it under C33. It was an immediate commercial success, going through 7 editions in less than 2 years, but it was the last real work he ever produced. He survived on an allowance from his wife of £3 a week, deliberately meager to discourage the sort of high living that had led to his downfall. Think about that. The man who had earned today's equivalent of £1 million from his play is now rationed by his estranged wife. He arrived in Paris and spoke of writing a new play. He arranged publication of the importance of being earnest and an ideal husband, making enormous revisions. But when these failed to stir interest, he was eviscerated. He never wrote again. Spoke of writing a new play. He arranged publication of the importance of being earnest and an ideal husband, making enormous revisions. But when these failed to stir interest, he was eviscerated. He never wrote again. Depression and loneliness plagued him. He dreaded being alone. He was occasionally treated to dinners, but mostly he spent his time talking to anyone who would listen. The greatest conversationalist in history, reduced to seeking an audience in cheap Parisian cafes. There's a more nuanced reading though. Scholar Nicholas Frankel argues that in Paris, Wilde was finally able to live freely as homosexual for the first time. Wilde told a journalist, "In Paris, one can go where one likes, and no one dreams of criticizing one." And the keynote of Wilde's exile, according to Frankel, was laughter. His letters remained laced with wit, including lines like "Laughter is the primeval attitude towards life, a mode of approach that survives only in artists and criminals." Wilde, of course, was both. The ear injury from his prison fall caused him meningitis, meningitis infection that worsened over the next 5 years and eventually killed him. He was initially buried in a pauper's grave at the Banyu Cemetery, following a thinly attended funeral. The man who had made his life his masterpiece watched that masterpiece destroyed, and yet, even in the destruction, he couldn't stop performing. On his deathbed, reportedly looking at the ugly wallpaper in his hotel room, he's said to have quipped, "One of us has got to go." Wow, Oscar Wilde. Let's go. Wow, the genius went into the life until the very end. The life just ran out of room for it. The man who had made his life his masterpiece watched that masterpiece destroyed, and yet, even in the destruction, he couldn't stop performing. On his deathbed, reportedly looking at the ugly wallpaper in his hotel room, he's said to have quipped, "One of us has got to go." After his death, how long did it take for the world to recognize the genius of Oscar Wilde? On his deathbed, reportedly looking at the ugly wallpaper in his hotel room, he's said to have quipped, "One of us has got to go. One of us has got to go." It came in waves, and the full arc took about 100 years. Wow. His funeral was sparsely attended, conducted with a low mass, and he was buried in an unadorned pauper's grave at Banyu Cemetery on the outskirts of Paris. Chosen because of limited funds, his works had been suppressed. His name was Poison. His wife Constance and the two sons had already changed the surname to Holland. The family has never reverted to the name Wilde. Think about that. His own bloodline erased him. Wow. Within 5 years, the first Cracks De Profundis was published posthumously in 1905, and the St. James Gazette described it as a book of great interest, reflecting that there had been no greater tragedy in literature than that which happened at the Old Bailey 10 years ago. The literary world was starting to separate the scandal from the work. The literary world was starting to separate the scandal from the work. 1907, his plays returned. A Woman of No Importance was revived by its original producer, and performances of his works began again. But this was tentative. The plays were appreciated despite the man, not because of him. A Woman of No Importance was revived by its original producer, and performances of his works began again. But this was tentative. The plays were appreciated despite the man, not because of him. A deliberate act of rescue. Robert Ross, Wilde's literary executor and loyal friend, organized the exhumation of his remains from the pauper's grave and re-internment at the prestigious Père Lachaise Cemetery. Calculated move to physically relocate Wilde from obscurity to a place where legacy is honored. Prestigious Père Lachaise Cemetery. Physically relocate. Ross then commissioned Jacob Epstein to create a monument, a massive modernist winged sphinx carved from a single 20-ton block of stone featuring prominent genitalia that deliberately rejected the effeminate caricatures of Wilde. Even the womb was a provocation. Oscar Wilde's tomb. Whoa. Whoa. Okay. Very interesting. People have drawn hearts on top of it. marked from lipstick. This is the original one. 1914. Wow. Oh my god. Oh my god. What have people done? Père Lachaise. Even the tomb was a provocation. 920s genuine revival. Wilde was revived. His works injected back into the mainstream for public consumption once again. Memories of his trial had faded. The genius of his works outweighed the prejudices surrounding his reputation. After 30 years, that's how long it took for the work to be read on its own terms. There's a telling detail from this era. Librarian nearly purchased forged Wilde letters, which tells you two things. Wilde's letters were now considered worth buying, and a forger thought they were worth faking. The full text arrives. De Profundis wasn't published in its complete uncensored form until 62. Over 60 years after his death, the full 50,000 word letter to Douglas had been suppressed, edited, sanitized. The real Wilde, in all his rage and tenderness and self-laceration, wasn't available to the public for more than half a century. Richard Ellman's definitive biography in 88 essentially canonized Wilde as both a literary genius and a martyr figure. The plays became permanent fixtures of the Western canon. His quotes became cultural currency. The state admits it was wrong. Wilde was among 50,000 men posthumously pardoned under the Turing law, named after another genius. The British state destroyed for being gay. Wow. The British state destroyed for being gay. 117 years after his death, government formally acknowledged it had been the criminal, not him. So what's the honest answer? The work was re-embraced. Within about 30 years, the man took closer to a century, and even now his grandson's name is still Holland, not Wilde. Some erasures don't fully reverse. There's something deeply relevant to your concept of the artist is more interesting than the art here, because with Wilde, the rehabilitation happened in reverse order. Society accepted his plays first because they could enjoy those without confronting what they had done to him. It took much longer to accept his life as a real masterwork, because that meant admitting they had destroyed the actual canvas. Wow. Who were some other prominent people who were posthumously pardoned under the Turing law? By the British government. Here's what's striking with the Turing law. Blanket pardon of approximately 49,000 men, not a list of individually named prominent figures. That's actually the point, and it's also the controversy. The two famous names are Alan Turing. Oh wow, Alan Turing. Oh my god, Alan Turing was part of it. What do we use today? We are using Turing Turing system or whatever, Turing thing. Turing. Well, what do we call it? Turing check, something like that. Turing test. We call it Turing test. That is it AI or not? The names aren't recorded on any celebrated list. They were men convicted under laws going all the way back to 1533, and the pardon covered England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Well, the story of Turing himself is worth knowing in this context. He was the mathematician, code breaker, who led the team at Bletchley Park that cracked Nazi Germany's Enigma code, arguably shortening World War II by years. He reported a burglary to police, and during the investigation acknowledged a sexual relationship with a man named Arnold Murray. Both were charged with gross indecency. Accepted chemical castration, hormone treatment as an alternative to prison. He died on June 7, 1954, age 41, from cyanide poisoning, ruled as suicide. The pardoning process has its own painful timeline. Turing himself wasn't pardoned until 2013, 59 years after his death, when Queen Elizabeth II granted a royal pardon. It was only the fourth royal pardon granted since the end of World War II. Then it took another 4 years for the blanket law to pass, covering everyone else. There's a deeply uncomfortable tension baked into the whole thing. George Montague, who was convicted of gross indecency in 1974, was still alive, said he wanted an apology, not a pardon. What's the difference between apology and pardon? A pardon is that, oh, you are exonerated of your crime. Apology means, hey, we're sorry. Pardon still comes from authority, that we are the authority, and we have now declared that you have been exonerated from the crime, that from the alleged crime. But apology means that no, we are sorry. We are sorry for what we did. We were wrong. He wanted an apology, not a pardon. To accept a pardon means you accept that you were guilty. I was not guilty of anything. That cuts right to the philosophical core. A pardon is the language of a system that still positions itself as the authority. Exactly. It says we forgive you, not we were wrong. That's the difference. I forgive you versus I was wrong. Wow. I forgive you means you did something wrong, and I'm telling you that you are now exonerated. But I was wrong is basically means I was wrong. That entire basis of that argument was wrong. The entire basis of that allegation was wrong. Language of a system that still positions itself as the authority. It says we forgive you, not we were wrong. Montague was insisting on the latter. Turing's nephew also pointed out a cruel asymmetry in the law. It grants automatic pardons to the dead, but living men still have to apply and prove their case. It grants automatic pardons to the dead, but living men still have to apply and prove their case. Oh, Microsoft Azure application, Gateway V2. As he put it, the government did not have the courage to treat live gay people as well as they have the dead. So to directly answer your question, there isn't really a list of prominent names beyond Turing and Wilde, and that absence is the story. As filmmaker Rosemary Reed put it, although none of the men in the film are prominent figures like Turing, their plights are just as powerful and deserve to be on an equal footing. The law destroyed 49,000 lives. We remember 2 names. The other are exactly the kind of erasure Wilde warned about. Actually, going back, I think one more thing that I asked my friend was that if you had to steal something from me, what would you steal? And he said he would steal the confidence, comfort, and authenticity. The confidence, comfort, and authenticity. And that was very, very interesting. Confidence, comfort, and authenticity. And there was another very interesting thing that I thought about. Like he said that I have too many interests and I'm not sure which one to go deep into. I'm interested in Formula One, prediction markets, psychedelics, and a couple more. Rave, music festivals, stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, like it's like you have to understand that you have to understand the lens has become much more important than the specific topic itself. We are all human beings. We are it's the same building, it's the same flower, it's the same music festival, it's the same concert, it's the same environment, but it is being experienced through billions of different perspectives. And that is what's important, and that is the story that people want to hear. That what is your perspective? What do you think when you experience this world? And that is truly important, or that is the unique thing. So yeah, when you go deep into Formula One, you will realize that you are not interested in everything about Formula One. You are just interested in one specific thing about Formula One. And similarly, if you go deep into psychedelics, you will realize that you are not interested in everything about psychedelics. You're only interested in very specific thing about psychedelics. You will see yourself leaning towards specific ideas and specific things within a topic. So even saying Formula One, that is still a very high level thing. So what you have to do is you have to really go deeper and deeper and deeper and realize that what is something that hits to you. Where do you get your dopamine hits from? Like, I really get a lot of dopamine hit from like finding these baller stories and like these quotes. When I'm reading them, something is happening in my head. It's triggering so many insights in my head, which I absolutely love. It's like an overflow of ideas and insights, and I love that. So that's the exact thing that that's the exact thing that everybody's searching for. That, hey, just go deep into everything that comes to your mind. Just go deep, just start reading about, start going deep about it. And AI, Claude, these are the best way to go deeper into things. And then slowly you will figure out the common thread, and the common thread you will realize is just you. It's just your unique perspective. What is your unique perspective? That's it. That's it. But I think this one thing that he said, which was very interesting, that young people are going through a collective awakening. Philosophical question against search necessity opted for direct engagement. It depends a lot on what you mean by awakening and who's framing it. There are some real measurable shifts happening among younger generations globally: declining trust in institutions, rising interest in mental health and self-awareness, skepticism toward traditional career paths, and growing engagement with spirituality outside organized religion, and a stronger orientation toward meaning making over material accumulation. Growing engagement with spirituality outside organized religion, and a stronger orientation toward meaning making over material accumulation. Surveys consistently show Gen Z and younger millennials reporting higher rates of existential questioning, climate anxiety, and disillusionment with consumer culture. But whether that constitutes an awakening is a matter of interpretation. A few tensions word setting with the case for it. Access to information is unprecedented. A 19-year-old in Jakarta can encounter Stoic philosophy, Advaita Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, psychedelic research, and systems theory in the same afternoon. Cross-cultural philosophical literacy is exploding in ways that were impossible even 20 years ago. There's also a genuine pattern of young people rejecting the default script. It would be very interesting to ask this question to Gemini and see how it responds. Based on the kind of content younger people are creating on YouTube. It would be very interesting to ask Claude. Okay. What are the latest breakthroughs in psychedelic research? Career, consumption status in favor of something more examined. Every generation believes cross-cultural philosophical literacy is exploding in ways that were impossible even 20 years ago. There's also a genuine pattern of young people rejecting the default script, career, consumption status in favor of something more examined. Every generation believes it's the one that's finally waking up. The Romantics thought it, the counterculture of the 60s thought it. Much of what gets called awakening on social media is aesthetic, repackaged wisdom as content, spiritual language without spiritual practice. Awareness of problems isn't the same as transformation. Awareness of problems isn't the same as transformation, and algorithmically mediated awakening can easily become another form of consumption. Awareness of problems isn't the same as transformation. Awareness of problems isn't the same as transformation, and algorithmically mediated awakening can easily become another form of consumption. The uncomfortable middle. There's probably a real signal buried in a lot of noise. Some subset of young people genuinely are questioning deeper assumptions about consciousness, meaning, and how to live. But that's always been true. What's different now is the speed of circulation and the collapse of cultural gatekeeping around these ideas. Is the speed of circulation and the collapse of cultural gatekeeping, collapse of cultural gatekeeping around these ideas. So it's less true or false and more something is shifting. But calling it an awakening might be premature until it produces durable changes in how people actually live, not just what they post about. What's prompting the question? Are you thinking about this for content, or is it something you're observing more personally? It's a fascinating observation, and you are definitely picking up on a real shift, whether we call it a collective awakening or a quiet revival, radical authenticity. Yeah, access to information plays a role over here. Questioning deeper assumptions about consciousness, meaning, how to live. Speed of circulation, collapse of cultural gatekeeping. Whether we call it collective awakening, quiet revival, radical authenticity, the data and current trends suggest that young people are indeed moving toward a more conscious, introspective, community-driven way of living. Polished influencer has largely faded, replaced by creators who prioritize raw, honest, and value-based content. Here's a breakdown of what is actually happening. The shift from aesthetic to authentic. Yeah, aesthetic, everything can be aesthetic. Everything can be aesthetic. I love aesthetics, but yeah, both have to come together. I think, yeah, it's also interesting. Both have to come together. Aesthetics, yeah, it's just reminds me, I've been thinking a lot about this idea that I think it was Joe Lonsdale from Palantir who was talking about it, that when they first started Palantir, it was just these bunch of young kids who were really smart, and they were just like, okay, we have something incredible over here, the tool, and all we had to do is just start selling. They set up a meeting with someone, and they went straight into the features and all the things about the product, and they were like, hey, here it is, it solves your problem. But then they slowly realized that a lot of, like, they have to, like, even though the product is right, they have to learn the art of sales. The art of sales revolves, like, the packaging also has to be right. The product, no matter how good the product is, the packaging is also really important. The end-to-end experience is really important, and the end-to-end experience involves a lot of work on aesthetics, on beauty, on negotiation skills, presentation. Yeah. The dark age of YouTube, roughly 2019-24, which was dominated by AI-generated content farming, hyper-saturated lifestyles, has led to a major pushback. Lo-fi uninfluencing. Gen Z and Gen Alpha are increasingly creating content that feels like a FaceTime call with a friend. Perfect look. FaceTime call with a friend. Very interesting. FaceTime call with a friend. Photo booth. What if I shared photo booth over here? That'd be cool. Mac OS screen capture. PQRS. Okay, let's see if this would be cool. Duplicate. Can you duplicate? No. Okay. This should be an option to duplicate. Mac OS screen capture. Screen capture 2. And let's see. I'll put it over here. And display capture, window capture, non-window capture, application capture. Wait, I think I'm doing it wrong. Okay, let's just delete this guy. Yes, delete. Okay, just try this one. Window capture. Okay, let's see. What if I do photo booth? Okay, it's working. Photo booth is working. Huh. ChatGPT, Google Gemini. That would be cool if you could use photo booth app. Just like more flavor, adding more flavor. That is all which this is about. Okay, we'll try that next time. Okay, parfait. So where are we at? Lo-fi and uninfluencing. Gen Z and General Flow are increasing creating content that feels like FaceTime call with a friend. The perfect look is being replaced by day in the life videos that show real struggles, mental health lows, and honest financial situations. The death of the script. There is a move toward mid to long form video essays that value deep dive research and personal voice over flashy editing. Unbundled spirituality. While traditional religious affiliation is declining in many regions, interest in spirituality is skyrocketing. I think philosophia is beautiful because it's love of wisdom. It's love of wisdom. It is not. It's love of wisdom. It is not philosophy in the sense of philosophy. It is love of wisdom. While traditional religious affiliation is declining in many regions, interest in spirituality is skyrocketing. Eclectic beliefs. On YouTube, you will see creators mixing elements of mindfulness, manifestation, and breathwork with traditional practices like prayer or fasting. Researchers call this faith unbundled, and people are choosing what resonates with them personally rather than following a rigid institutional doctrine. Community over dogma. YouTube has become a hub for niche digital congregations, whether it's a study with me stream that fosters a sense of collective focus or a deep dive into environmental ethics. The goal is often connection rather than just consumption. Radical intentionality. The content being created in 2026 shows a generation that is waking up to the downsides of the digital life, like doom scrolling and AI saturation. Radical intentionality. Eclectic beliefs. And this is also very interesting because sometimes you stop thinking about the fact that what you are feeling is also something that other people are feeling, and that other people are also taking action on it, and it could be the same engine, it could be the same source, but it could manifest into a different reality, and you are just looking at the manifested reality and you think that, oh, that's not aligned. But you have to find people with the same sources, who have the same source of energy, who are using the same source of energy. Yeah. You'll see creators mixing elements of mindfulness, manifestation, breathwork with traditional practices like prayer or fasting. Researchers call this faith unbundled. Young people are choosing what resonates with them personally rather than following a rigid institution doctrine. YouTube has become a hub for niche digital congregations, whether it's a study with me stream that fosters a sense of collective focus or a deep dive into environmental ethics. The goal is often connection rather than just consumption. Connection over consumption. Connection is really important. Connection is really important. You want to feel connection with yourself, connection with other people. Radical intentionality. The content being created in 26 shows a generation that is waking up to the downsides of digital age, like doom scrolling and AI saturation. Digital fatigue. There is a surge in digital detox and slow living content. Young people are documenting their journey of reclaiming their attention spans and moving toward minimalism and intentionality in their purchases and relationships. Social and civic agency. YouTube vlogs are increasingly used as tools for civic participation. Young people aren't just complaining, they are using the platform to organize for social issues, from climate change to racial reconciliation. Why is this happening now? Instability, climate anxiety, economic uncertainty. Climate anxiety, economic uncertainty, and global tensions have created a search for meaning. When the outside world feels chaotic, people look inward. Instability, climate anxiety, economic uncertainty, and global tensions have created a search for meaning. When the outside world feels chaotic, people look inward. The AI response. As AI generated content becomes indistinguishable from reality, the only thing that remains valuable is human vulnerability. Young creators are leaning into their humanness because it's the one thing an algorithm can't fake. Is it a collective awakening? In many ways, yes. If awakening means a widespread realization that the status quo, hustle culture, shallow consumption, digital isolation isn't working, the content reflects a massive search for a better way of life. Give me some examples of such YouTube channels. Is this true? This is also cool. Keep going between, again, like YouTube. Gemini is pretty cool because Gemini can look at, I don't know if it actually looked at YouTube data, but it was pretty interesting that it will actually give you much better details about what people are actually creating on YouTube, how people are reacting to what's happening on YouTube. Clinical outcomes that are turning heads. Okay, so this one is interesting. This is latest breakthroughs in psychedelic research. MDMA assisted psychotherapy. Okay, by the way, let's quickly check if yesterday's stream has been processed for transcripts, so we can go back. Is the stream processed? Stream is processed. Let's go. Show transcript. Turn Claude. And post stream extract. Post stream extract. Let's do it. Parfait. And I think it did for approved plan. Let's go. Wow. So streams are getting processed, which is pretty fun. I think the more timestamps we add to our streams, the better YouTube is able to understand our content, and it is better able to find people who are aligned. And it's actually pretty good. It's actually pretty good that if we are creating content, algorithms have become really good at finding other people who care about the same things. So if there are other people who care about the same things, once YouTube studies our content, it will show it to them, and we will find our people. We'll keep finding our people. MDMA-assisted psychotherapy is showing lasting symptom relief in about 71% of veterans and first responders with PTSD at the 12-month mark. Meanwhile, Cybin's modified psilocybin analog, breakthrough therapy designation from the FDA. Ketamine, assisted therapy for alcohol use disorder, has advanced phase 3 trials. Anti-aging surprise. Psilocin, the active metabolite of psilocybin, can delay cellular aging and extend lifespan 50% longer. Mice treated with psilocybin lived roughly 30% longer. Entirely new research direction beyond psychiatry. Non-hallucinogenic alternatives gaining traction. Yeah, hallucination. Hallucination is also very interesting. You need hallucination for creativity. Without hallucination, you are rigid. With hallucination, you are creative. What allows some LLMs to be extremely creative is hallucination. Wow. Tell me about the role hallucination plays in the creativity of an LLM. This is where it gets really interesting from a paradigm perspective. Delix Therapeutics reported positive early results for zalzupindole, neuroplastogen designed to provide therapeutic benefits of psychedelics without the trip. At-home administration, first of its class for treatment. We assume Big Pharma would only pursue non-hallucinogenic options, so the field is bifurcating, some pursuing the trip-free route, others doubling down on the full psychedelic experience. Neuroscience deepening the buy. I think, again, people will go for derivatives and alternatives. People will start creating these things. And what's going to happen is that sometimes people will also look for, some of the people will also look for creating something that gives you that replicates the true experience without giving you the true experience. That is what the derivatives and alternatives are always trying to do. They try to give you the true experience. They try to replicate the true experience without giving you the actual true experience. A new neuroscience deepening the why. Researchers developed a new neuroplasticity promoting drug closely related to LSD that captures therapeutic power with reduced hallucinogenic effects. Penn researchers found that psilocybin calms brain circuits tied to pain and mood in the anterior cingulate cortex, bypassing injury sites entirely, suggesting a mechanism for treating chronic pain that's fundamentally different from opioids. And a study on high ventilation breathwork showed it can evoke psychedelic-like states by shifting blood flow in the brain, which is fascinating for the do you even need the substance question. Exactly. That's exactly what we are doing. That's exactly these guys are doing. They are replicating the real experience without giving you the real experience. Neuroplasticity promoting drug closely related to LSD that captures therapeutic power with reduced hallucinogenic effects. Why do you not want hallucination? Psilocybin calms brain circuits tied to pain and mood in the anterior cingulate cortex, bypassing injury sites entirely, suggesting a mechanism for treating chronic pain that's fundamentally different from opioids. And a study on high ventilation breath work showed it can evoke psychedelic-like states by shifting blood flow in the brain, which is fascinating for the do you even need the substance question. The FDA approved a record 6 phase 3 psychedelic trials. Compass Pathways raised $150 million. Psilocybin therapy trials. Cybin secured up to $500 million. Over 3 dozen psychedelic-related bills were introduced across more than a dozen U.S. states. A groundbreaking study examining whether psilocybin therapy can address functional impairment, not just symptom relief, but whether People can actually return to work and rebuild relationships. Very interesting. Okay, let's see from 71 steps. Wow, okay. Let's see if we have any interesting insights over here from yesterday's stream. All right, here we are. This is triple me going on. Me analyzing me from yesterday, which is analyzing me from 2 days ago. Wow, okay. Flow as forward escape. AI as identity dismemberment. It approximates the craft you spend years mastering, forces the essential thread. The Upanishads already asked, who am I without my craft? It would be between people who know who they are without their professional identity and people who don't are defined with any skill was always a mistake. The larger island of knowledge, the longer the shoreline of wonder. Learning doesn't resolve mystery, it deepens it. Every time you pursue a goal, you live in the opposite feeling. Going to the gym to build strength, you feel weak daily. Learning a language, you feel stupid daily. The process of growth is defined by inhabiting the gap. Growth feels like its opposite. Emotional texture of progress is the exact inverse of the emotional texture of achievement. Emotional texture. Don't look at the wall, look where you want to go. Your body follows your eyes. Knowledge work is disembodied, that's the problem. Your gym is your community, choose it like a neighborhood. Drugs as prosthetic flow. Each new major recreational prosthetic flow. Wow, that's a good term. Maps directly onto a specific neurochemical that flow produces naturally. Dopamine, cocaine, endorphins, opioids, anandamide, cannabis, serotonin, MDMA. Bliss, serotonin, excitement, engagement, love. Systematically remove the natural pathways for these chemicals, and drugs became prosthetic replacements for specific flow triggers. The pharmacology of missing flow. Frame the addiction crisis not as a moral failure, but as a flow deficit. Wow, this is so good. By the way, this is also really good because this is amazing. This entire thing is amazing. Wow. This is pretty cool. When you wanna each major recreational drug maps onto a specific neurochemical that flow produces naturally. Dopamine to cocaine, endorphins to opioids, anandamide to cannabis, serotonin to MDMA. The pharmacology of missing flow. Frame the addiction crisis not as a moral failure but as a flow deficit. Modern life removed with the natural triggers, challenge, risk, embodiment, community, ritual. People found chemical shortcuts to the same neurochemical states. This reframes both the problem and the solution. Play to work kills motivation, work to play unlocks flow. Wow. Asian ops. Hamptonism. Surmount West. Psychocybernetics. Chicks have me high. Wow. 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 It's really cool. It's really cool. I'm excited to update the... Oh, this was amazing. This was amazing. What channels has Gemini come up with? The Cottage Fairy, Rural Washington, focusing on mindfulness, seasonal living, and managing anxiety through nature. Jonna Jinden, Northern Sweden, channels a visceral experience of the elements. She combines culling, ancient herding calls with stories of moving away from the city to live in harmony with the wild. Sustainable living and gardening. This channel demonstrates how to create a lush, intentional life, even within limited physical footprint. Samurai Matcha, Beauty of Nothing, documenting a live strip of excess consumerism to make room for mental clarity. Radical Authenticity, Conscious Living. So first was Slow Living, okay. Emma Chamberlain, Traditional Vlogger, Blueprint for Radical Honesty. Podcasts and vlogs often dive into the nothingness of life, existential dread, and the storage for genuine connection. Heal Your Living, Yo Hiem, extreme minimalist, focuses on mindful consumption. Reducing a physical and digital clutter can lead to a deeper spiritual awakening. Malama Life explores intentional living through the lens of mental health, focusing on how to slow down in a world that demands constant productivity. Unbundled Spirituality and Philosophy. Etai Atula, prominent Gen Z yogi, author of Old Path, New Prince, Digital Brain Rot, Ancient Spiritual Wisdom, documenting his pilgrimages and teaching mindfulness as a language that resonates with his generation. Next Level Soul, Alex Ferrari, deep dive into views on near-death experiences, quantum physics, and the soul's purpose. Quantum physics, okay. How would quantum physics help me understand or unlock new insights in my life with philosophy, with achieving my goals? Let's see what it says. A Shaolin master whose videos on self-mastery focus on inner peace have become viral manuals for young people trying to navigate digital fatigue and emotional instability. The corrective video assist. A to Zen Life, a channel that thoroughly explores minimalism and uninfluencing, helping viewers identify toxic cycles of consumption. Dan Coe, wow. Lifestyle Design, he speaks to the creator economy not as a way to get rich, but as a way to reclaim one's time and focus on deep, meaningful work. 2016 Flex, buying a Lamborghini mansion and the hustle. 2026 Flex, quiet morning, homegrown garden, mental clarity, ability to be offline for a week. Offline for a week. Wow. Let's check this one out first. As AI generated content becomes indistinguishable from reality, the only thing that remains valuable is human vulnerability. Well, it's very interesting. There was a time when I couldn't even say vulnerability. Compelling frame, partly true, partly a comforting story we tell ourselves, where it holds up. As generative, this is good. This is good to get AIs to debate with each other and prove each other wrong. Human vulnerability, connection is important. In general, connection is important. I don't think specifically you have to be vulnerable all the time, but yes, connection is important. Energy is important. The craft labor creative work is getting commoditized. What can be faked, at least not yet, is the felt sense that someone is risking something by sharing it. Perfectly composed essay about grief means less than a stumbling, awkward admission from someone who's actually grieving. The signal of vulnerability is I have skin in the game. This cost me something. And the signal is becoming rarer and therefore more valuable precisely because everything else can be manufactured at zero cost. A few problems with making this your whole thesis. First, vulnerability can absolutely be performed and manufactured. Influencer culture already proved this before AI. the scripted authenticity. AI will only make synthetic vulnerability more convincing, not less. So vulnerability alone isn't a stable foundation for value. Second, it quietly devalues craft, skill, and rigor. It quietly devalues craft, skill, and rigor, things that are generally valuable independent of whether someone suffered to produce them. A brilliant proof, a well-designed bridge, elegant code, these don't require vulnerability to matter. Third, there's something slightly narcissistic lurking in the claim. It centers human feeling as the locus of all value, which is flattering to us but might not hold up. A lot of what's generally valuable, truth, beauty, coherence, utility, doesn't require a vulnerable human behind it to function. Locus of all value. A lot of what's genuinely valuable, truth, beauty, coherence, utility, doesn't require a vulnerable human behind it to function. Floods every channel. What becomes valuable isn't vulnerability per se, but stakes, skin in the game, consequences. A human who can be wrong, who can be embarrassed, who will live with the outcome of what they say. That's what creates trust. Vulnerability is one expression of stakes, but so is accountability, commitment, and embodied experience. Accountability, commitment, and embodied experience. The philosopher you would want here is probably Nassim Taleb more than Brené Brown. It's less about emotional openness and more about asymmetric risk. Who pays the price if this turns out to be wrong? Interesting. Fascinating topic. One that sits at a really interesting intersection of AI, engineering, and philosophy of mind. Hallucination as a feature, not just a bug. Hallucination refers to an LLM generating confident but factually incorrect outputs, fabricated citations, invented statistics, false claims. It's rightly treated as a reliability problem, but the same underlying mechanism, the model's ability to generate novel combinations that don't exist in its training data, is explicit pairings, essentially what makes LLMs creative at all. Proposes an unexpected solution is doing something structurally similar to hallucination. Producing outputs that aren't direct retrievals but probabilistic compositions. The difference is contextual. Probabilistic compositions, not retrievals. They are not direct retrievals, but probabilistic compositions. In a factual query, novelty is a failure mode. In a factual query, novelty is a failure mode. In a creative task, it's the whole point. The shared mechanism. AI is the mirror. AI is the mirror. It's just like, how would you train a kid? AI is a mirror. Training an AI to not hallucinate is exactly like training your kid to stop playing and doing whatever he wants and sit down and do math exercises. You are training to go from being creative to focusing on a very specific factual task. And there is a balance. You don't want your kid to be just exploring all the time. You kind of want to give them a structure a little bit, and also give them more context that, hey, this is your play time, so go play. This is your grammar time, so let's go grammar. So I think that's also really important. Yeah, AI is a mirror. AI is a mirror. Wow. The shared mechanism, interpolation, latent space. LLMs represent concepts as high-dimensional vectors. Creativity emerges when the model traverses regions of the space that sit between well-established clusters, blending concepts that weren't explicitly connected in training. This is the same process that produces hallucination. The model doesn't have a separate be creative module. It has a single generative process whose outputs we evaluate differently depending on context. This is why temperature, the randomness parameter, affects both creativity and accuracy in the same direction. High temperature yields more surprising, novel outputs, but also more factual errors. One might appreciate your interest in Eastern philosophy that this mirrors something about human cognition. Human creativity also emerges from a kind of productive confabulation. Dreams, free association, brainstorming, these all involve loosening the constraints that normally keep your cognition accurate and letting the mind wander into novel territory. The Vedantic concept of Maya, illusion, is interesting here. The same capacity for generating appearances that aren't grounded in ultimate reality is also what makes the richness of experience possible. These all involve loosening the constraints that normally keep our cognition accurate and letting the mind wander into novel territory. The Vedantic concept of Maya, illusion, is interesting here. The same capacity for generating appearances that aren't grounded in ultimate reality is also what makes the richness of experience possible. Wow. Human creativity also emerges from a kind of productive confabulation. Dreams, free association, brainstorming, these all involve loosening the constraints that normally keep our cognition accurate and letting the mind wander into novel territory. The Vedantic concept of Maya, illusion, is interesting here. The same capacity for generating appearances that aren't grounded in ultimate reality is also what makes the richness of experience possible. Nietzsche touched on this too in The Birth of Tragedy. The Apollonian impulse to create beautiful forms is essentially a productive hallucination layered over the Dionysian chaos. Beneath, art requires the ability to see what isn't there. Wow. Art requires the ability to see what isn't there. I love this. So this is going into our quotes app. We'll open Claude. We'll open our quotes app. And we'll go to latest. We'll add this quote text. And this was said by Claude. The only art I will ever study is stuff that I can steal from. David Bowie. The greater the inferiority feeling, the greater the goal, the higher the goal of personal power. The higher the goal of personal power. Personal power. Wow. Nietzsche touched on this too in The Birth of Tragedy. The Apollonian impulse to create beautiful forms is essentially a productive hallucination layered over the Dionysian chaos beneath. This creates a genuine design challenge. You can fully eliminate hallucination without also suppressing the generative flexibility that makes LLMs useful for creative work. Retrieval, augmented generation, and chain of thought reasoning all try to channel the generative capacity rather than eliminate it, keeping the model grounded when grounding matters, while preserving its ability to surprise. The frontier question is whether we can build systems that are metacognitively aware of when they are in factual retrieval mode versus creative generation mode, essentially developing something like the human ability to distinguish between remembering and imagining. We are not fully there yet, but that's the direction things are moving. It's one of those cases where a flaw turns out to be inseparable from the capability people most value. The hallucination is the creativity viewed from a different angle. The Vedantic concept of Maya is interesting here. The same capacity for generating appearances that aren't grounded in ultimate reality is also what makes the richness of experience possible. Wow. Skin in the game, consequences, a human who can be wrong, who can be embarrassed, who will live. I'm reading this, but I don't really understand it, if this is right. Like, it's not hitting me, it's not connecting with me. Skin in the game, consequences, a human who can be wrong, who can be embarrassed, who will live with the outcome of what they say. That's what creates trust. Alright, quantum physics. Prashant, honestly, one where your existing philosophical toolkit already has deep resonance with quantum insights, sometimes predating them by millennia. How would quantum physics help me understand or unlock new insights in my life with philosophy, with achieving my goals? I think I'm excited that we named it, we call it Philosophia. Philosophia. Livestream of consciousness presented by WisprFlow, NS, and OpenAI Atlas. Livestream of consciousness presented by WisprFlow, NS, and OpenAI Atlas. Okay, cool. Predating them by millennia. Observer effect as lived philosophy. It's also interesting. We love Claude, we love Grok, we love all these tools. SpaceX is good. Ramp, we gotta remove Ramp. Or maybe we'll keep Ramp. Because we need a way to manage the finances as well. Okay. Observer effect as lived philosophy. Quantum mechanics demonstrate that observation collapses the way you function. The act of measuring changes what's measured. You are already building. Okay, by the way, what happened to Google Chrome? I think it's good. You can close this. Okay, cool. Quantum mechanics demonstrated that observation collapses the way you function. The act of measuring changes what's measured. You are already building philosophical instruments that do exactly this. Your mirrors that force self-confrontation are essentially observation devices that collapse comfortable superpositions of self-narrative. The insight here is that attention itself is creative, not passive. When you direct attention at your goals, you are not just watching, you are participating in shaping the outcome. When you direct attention at your goals, you are not just watching, you are participating in shaping the outcome. This maps directly to the Upanishadic idea that consciousness isn't a witness to reality, but a constituent of it. Superposition and the death of fixed identity. Before measurement, a quantum system exists in multiple states simultaneously. Nietzsche's self-overcoming and your phantom limb for abandoned cells tool are playing with the same idea that you exist as multiple potential versions until you collapse into one through choice. Before measurement, a quantum system exists in multiple states simultaneously. Nietzsche's self-overcoming and your phantom limb for abandoned cells tool are playing with the same idea that you exist as multiple potential versions until you collapse into one through choice. Superposition and the death of fixed identity. Before measurement, oh, this is really cool. Before measurement, a quantum system exists in multiple states simultaneously. Nietzsche's self-overcoming and your phantom limb for abandoned cells tool are playing with the same idea that you exist as multiple potential versions until you collapse into one through choice. The practical unlock. Most people treat their identity as classical, fixed, determined, but it's actually quantum, probabilistic, context dependent, probabilistic. Wow. Your philosophical instruments could lean harder into this. Helping people feel the genuine vertigo of being uncollapsed, helping people feel the genuine vertigo of being uncollapsed, entanglement and non-locality. Two entangled particles influence each other instantaneously regardless of distance. Two entangled particles influence each other instantaneously regardless of distance. The Vedantic concept of Brahman, the interconnected ground of all being, isn't just poetic metaphor here. It suggests that the boundaries you draw between self and environment, or my goals and the world's response, are artificial partitions of a more unified field. Practically, this reframes goal achievement from me pushing against the world to me and the world co-arising. That's a fundamentally different orientation toward action. Entanglement and non-locality. Two entangled particles influence each other instantaneously regardless of distance. The Vedantic concept of Brahman, the interconnected ground of all being, isn't just poetic metaphor here. It suggests that the boundaries you draw between self and environment, or my goals and the world's response, are wow. This reminds me of reality transurfing. It's pretty much the same book. Wow. Interconnected ground of all being is just poetic metaphor. It suggests that the boundaries you draw between self and environment, or my goals and the world's response, are artificial partitions of a more unified field. Practically, this reframes goal achievement from me pushing against the world to me and the world co-arising. Fundamentally different orientation toward action. The uncertainty principle as epistemic humility. Heisenberg showed you can't simultaneously know position and momentum with perfect precision. Applied to your life. You can know where you are or where you are going with clarity, but trying to pin down both where you are and where you are going with clarity, but trying to pin down both simultaneously with total precision creates a distortion. This is actually liberating. It means the feeling of not having everything figured out isn't a failure of planning. It's a structural feature of reality. Your podcast and content strategy might benefit from embracing this more explicitly. Clarity of direction without rigid attachment to position. Clarity of direction without rigid attachment to position. Quantum tunneling and impossible goals. A particle can pass through a barrier it classically shouldn't have enough energy to cross. Quantum tunneling and impossible goals. A particle can pass through a barrier it classically shouldn't have enough energy to cross. The probability is low but non-zero. This is the physics version of what every philosophical tradition you study points towards, that the impossible is a classical approximation or an absolute. The soul dating startup pivoted from nanotech engineering to philosophy, tech, content creation. You have already tunneled through barriers. If philosophia means love or wisdom, what does technology mean? You have already tunneled through barriers that looked solid from the classical perspective. The deepest inside. What is the definition of technology? The deepest insight, though, might be this: quantum physics didn't discover something new about reality. It discovered that our classical assumptions were always wrong. The universe was never the deterministic, separable, observer-independent machine we pretended it was. The Upanishads, Sufi mystics, and even pure six quality were pointing at this all along, that reality is participatory, relational, and irreducibly mischievous. For philosophical instruments specifically, I would say the most potent quantum concept to build around is decoherence, how quantum possibilities collapse into classical definiteness through interaction with the environment. Wow. There are multiple, but you choose this, so now this is definite. This is the interaction that you had with the environment. That's essentially the mechanism by which infinite potential becomes finite reality. Every scroll, every click, every habit is a decoherence event. This is beautiful. Sometimes I feel like you play with Instagram, you play with Twitter, and I feel like, wow, I You play with Instagram, you play with Twitter, and I'm like, I don't really like how how reality has been boxed into these. Yeah, yeah. Reality has to be more interactive. I don't like how reality is limited, restricted into this interface over here. Yeah. Wow. Every scroll, every click, every habit is a decoherence event. You could build something that makes people feel the potential they are collapsing with each choice. For a philosophical instrument specifically, I would say the most potent concept to build around is decoherence, how quantum possibilities collapse into classical definiteness through interaction with the environment. One thing I'm thinking right now is that just the fact that I posted this tweet that Vancouver AI Film Festival WIFE is happening on April 30 in Orpheum Theatre. Just the fact that I posted that with a beautiful photo of Orpheum Theatre, everybody is now thinking about it. I have created reality in people's mind. Like, this is what people would be excited about. Like, on one end, I'm also thinking that, oh, we should do a smaller version of it. But yeah, you can do a smaller version of it for testing, for helping people and all that stuff. But finally, it's going to take the same energy to do it in Orpheum Theatre versus in another theater. So yeah, the point is to, if you want to do something, just do the one which people are going to be most excited for, and yeah, go straight for it. Go straight for it. At its most essential, technology is the application of knowledge for practical purposes. Philosophia, technology. What is the breakdown of technology? Technology means the logic of craft, love of wisdom, and the logic of craft. Application of knowledge for practical purposes. Any tool, technique, system, or method that extends human capability to achieve something we couldn't as easily with our bare biology alone. But the etymology is where it gets interesting for you. It comes from the Greek techne, craft, plus logos, word, reason, study. Techne, craft, art, skill. So literally means the logic of craft, reasoned making. Technology, the logic of craft. This is why your framing of meditation as technology and philosophical instruments as tools isn't metaphorical at all. A mantra is technology, a koan is technology, the Upanishadic practice of Neti Neti is a technique for collapsing false identification. It's a debugging tool for consciousness. Heidegger has a famous essay on this, The Question of Concerning Technology, where he argued that modern technology's essence isn't the machines themselves, but a particular way of wow. I also really believe in this idea. I don't believe, but I think about this idea of that you return. You go all around to return to where you started. And I think for me, you think a lot about this. I'm like, okay, wait, I studied nanotechnology. I studied quantum physics and quantum mechanics. Am I coming back to it slowly? Am I going through this entire phase of crypto and AI and philosophy to finally figure out quantum mechanics and quantum physics? Wow. Has a famous essay on this, The Question Concerning Technology, where he argued, okay. Give me some quotes from the top quantum physicist. I'm really curious. Okay, let's see. It's also really cool to just keep using all these AI tools to understand their power and start using them as a layer, not getting excited by the tool itself, but getting excited by what you can do with these tools, what you can create from these tools. Starting to, like, this becomes your baseline. This becomes your true baseline now, so that you can go and think bigger and do bigger things. Because most of the times, I think even today, people are just really excited about the technology itself and not excited about what it can now enable you to do. The Question Concerning Technology, where he argued that modern technology's essence isn't the machines themselves, but a particular way of revealing the world, one that treats everything as standing reserve, resource to be optimized. He contrasted this with poiesis, the older Greek sense of technology, as bringing forth closer to art than engineering. By the way, I'm not happy with Claude's analysis of yesterday's stream, because I'm thinking like, wait, did you just? It felt like it repeated a lot of stuff that I said from day 26, but maybe that was a time when I was just doing a bunch of analysis. So I was just like, maybe that was a stream and I was just doing a bunch of analysis and I didn't talk about something real. So yeah, this is also interesting. You gotta have to figure out debt sometimes, the technical debt, and then once you figure out technical debt, you can go bigger, you can go higher. Yeah. He argued that modern technology's essence isn't the machines, but a particular way of revealing the world, one that treats everything as standing reserve. He contrasted this with poiesis, art of engineering. What you're building sits right at the boundary. Your philosophical instruments use modern tech, core interfaces AI, but aim for the older purpose, revealing rather than extracting. Niels Bohr. If quantum mechanics hasn't profoundly shocked you, you haven't understood it yet. Everything we call real is made of things that cannot be regarded as real. Everything we call real is made of things that cannot be regarded as real. Werner Heisenberg. What we observe is not nature itself, but nature exposed to our method of questioning. What we observe is not nature itself. Werner Heisenberg. What we observe is not nature itself, but nature exposed to our method of questioning. Yes. What we observe is not nature itself, but nature exposed to our method of questioning, exposed to our current perspective, exposed to our lens currently. The atoms or elementary particles themselves. Oh wow, actually this needs to go into our quotes app. That's a good one. Uh-oh. Not this one, this one. Yeah, you read about all these guys, Niels Bohr, Werner Heisenberg, but finally now I'm like, I like this guy. I like Niels Bohr. And Niels Bohr is talking about cool stuff. Quantum mechanics hasn't profoundly shocked you. You haven't understood it yet. Everything we call real is made of things that cannot be regarded as real. What we observe is not nature itself, but nature exposed to our method of questioning. Deep philosophical stuff now. The atoms or elementary particles themselves are not real. They form a world of potentialities or possibilities rather than one of things or facts. The atoms or elementary particles. I think this is also very interesting. When I think of David Senra is doing something really cool, but he is having a shorter time to feedback. Because he is taking 1 week to go deep into a book and put it out there and do that. But maybe he has found it. I don't know. But you can definitely see the evolution now, the beautiful evolution now, and the evolution is in me as well. Like I was talking to a friend today. I'm like, so what was I interested in? I was like, this entire streaming started with, let's say, first deep history, or first even, let's say, first it started with technology's history, then companies' history, then we got into some philosophical stuff, world's history, then we got deep into AI, and now then we got into philosophy, Upanishads, we got into spirituality, Upanishads, and now I'm into quantum mechanics, quantum physics. So we are exploring everything. Let's go. What we observe is not nature itself, but nature exposed to our method of questioning. The atoms or elementary particles themselves are not real. They form a world of potentialities or possibilities rather than one of things or facts. I like this one thing which it says, how quantum possibilities collapse into classical definiteness through interaction with the environment. That's essentially the mechanism by which the infinite potential becomes finite reality. Every scroll, every click, every habit is a decoherence event. Quantum physics didn't discover something new about reality. I really like this phrasing of all the probabilities collapsing into one finite reality. This is also pretty cool. Entanglement and non-locality. The Vedantic concept of Brahman, the infinite ground of all being. Boundaries you draw between self and environment or my goals and the world's response are artificial partitions of a more unified field. Practically, this reframes goal achievement from me pushing against the world to me and the world co-arising. That's a fundamentally different orientation toward action. Superposition. This is cool. Quantum system exists in multiple states simultaneously. You exist as a multiple potential versions until you collapse into one through choice. The practical unlock. Most people treat their identity. You exist as multiple potential versions until you collapse into one through choice. I love this. I love this. This is so good. So good. The practical unlock. Most people treat this identity as classical when it's actually quantum. Your philosophical instruments could lean helping people feel A quantum system exists in multiple states simultaneously. You exist as multiple potential versions until you collapse into one through choice. The most potent quantum concept to build around is decoherence, how quantum possibilities collapse into classical definiteness through interaction with the environment. Love this. Love this. Like, just the way it's phrased, it's beautiful. Collapses. It changes. I don't know if I like the way it's phrased more or the idea more, but both are really cool. Like how it makes you think that, yeah, they're like in this moment, there are infinite versions, but I just chose this right now. I just chose this and everything collapsed right now. Everything collapsed. All the multiple infinite realities collapsed into this one reality. How quantum possibilities collapse into classical definiteness through interaction with the environment. That's essentially the mechanism by which infinite potential becomes finite reality. Wow, we're getting into consciousness. Yes, Schrödinger. The atoms or elementary particles themselves. I think AI is the most truest way to experience content, to experience the true content or true work by people in the past, because everything else that you see right now is interpretations and derivatives of things that were said by the true influencers. Everything today is just a derivative. Every book today is a derivative of work by the OG influencers. Yeah, it's really important. It's really important to use AI to get as close as possible to the people themselves. The atoms or elementary particles themselves are not real. They form a world of potentialities or possibilities rather than one of things or facts. Schrödinger. The task is not so much to see what no one has yet seen, but to think what nobody has yet thought about that which everybody sees. Schrödinger. what we observe is not nature itself. Okay, so we read that. The atoms or elementary particles themselves are not real. They form a world of potentialities or possibilities rather than one of things or facts. The task is not so much to see what no one has yet seen, but to think what nobody has yet thought about that which everybody sees. Oh my god. Oh my god. Schrödinger. We know Schrödinger is a hit. We know Schrödinger is a hit. Because Schrödinger is a hit. The guy who made Schrödinger's cat would definitely have very interesting thoughts. I think you have to apply the Mr. Beast content to everybody. If you see yourself using someone's work a lot, if you see yourself using someone's work a lot or just coming across someone's work a lot, it would be very interesting to just go back and ask your AI that give me quotes from this guy because or this person, because this person would be very interesting to learn from. The task is not so much to see what no one has yet seen, but to think what nobody has yet thought about that which everybody sees. Consciousness cannot be accounted for in physical terms, for consciousness is absolutely fundamental. It cannot be accounted for in terms of anything else. The task is not so much to see what no one has yet seen, but to think what nobody has yet thought about that which everybody sees. Oh my god. Oh my god. Consciousness cannot be accounted for in physical terms, for consciousness is absolutely fundamental. It cannot be accounted for in terms of anything else. Richard Feynman, I think I can safely say that nobody understands quantum mechanics. Nature uses only the longest threads to weave her patterns, so that each small piece of her fabric reveals the organization of the entire tapestry. Nature uses only the longest threads to weave her patterns, so that each small piece of her fabric reveals the organization of the entire tapestry. Max Planck. I regard consciousness as fundamental. Wow, they all talking consciousness. Schrödinger, Max Planck, Richard Feynman. I think I can safely say that nobody understands quantum mechanics. Nature uses only the longest threads to weave her patterns, so that each small piece of her fabric reveals the organization of the entire tapestry. Longest threads to weave her patterns, so that each small piece of her fabric reveals the organization of the entire tapestry. Basically, Richard Feynman is saying that how everything is connected. Max Planck, I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as a derivative from consciousness. Wow. What did he mean by that? Whoa, where's my cursor? Yes, cursor is back. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. Wow. What did he mean by that? Science cannot solve the ultimate mystery of nature, and that is because in the last analysis, we ourselves are a part of the mystery that we are trying to solve. Max Planck is very philosophical. Max Planck is very focused on consciousness. Wow. Okay, update, setup update. Okay. Wow. All right, let's see. I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. Science cannot solve the ultimate mystery of nature, and that is because in the last analysis, we ourselves are a part of the mystery that we are trying to solve. David Bohm, the ability to perceive or think differently is more important than the knowledge gained. The ability to perceive or think differently. The ability to perceive or think differently is more important than the knowledge gained. In some sense, man is a microcosm of the universe. Therefore, what man is a clue to the universe. The ability to perceive or think differently is more important than the knowledge gained. Wow, wow, wow. You realize that quantum physicists and quantum physicists are the most philosophical, and you are interested in philosophy, and these are the guys who have truly seen what every matter is made up of and can truly comment more from a philosophical perspective that what makes sense now. So what makes sense? What makes sense now that we know that we are made up of these things that are not even real? I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. Science cannot solve the ultimate mystery of nature, and that is because in the last analysis, we ourselves are part of the mystery that we are trying to solve. The ability to perceive or think differently is more important than the knowledge gained. Think differently. Perceive or think differently. In some sense, man is a microcosm of the universe. Therefore, what man is a clue to the universe. John Wheeler. No phenomena is a real phenomena until it is an observed phenomena. No phenomena is a real phenomena until it is an observed phenomena. We are participators in bringing into being not only the near and here, but the far away and long ago. We are participators in bringing into being not only the near and here, but the far away and long ago. Wow, everybody's amazing. Most striking ones. Notice the thread running through all of them. Consciousness keeps showing up as irreducible rather than incidental. These aren't mystics saying this. These are the people who build the mathematics. Planck and Schrödinger in particular sound almost Vedantic, and Schrödinger actually was deeply influenced by the Upanishads. He credited them explicitly. Wow. 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 Oh, I thought I was about to end the stream, but this is getting much more interesting. Tell me more. Okay, water break. It's been 3 hours. Oh my god. Okay. Water break. We're back. All right, let's see. First, we'll look into Max Planck. Okay. Also, give me quotes from all the quantum physicists which are more philosophical and around consciousness. Okay, let's see. Max Planck. Planck is making a radical ontological claim here. What was the claim again? Consciousness is, I regard consciousness as fundamental, I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. He's saying that consciousness isn't a byproduct of matter, which is the standard materialist assumption. Atoms arrange themselves into brains and brains somehow produce consciousness. He's saying that consciousness isn't a byproduct of matter, which is the standard materialist assumption. Atoms arrange themselves into brains and brains somehow produce consciousness. He's inverting the hierarchy entirely. Consciousness comes first, matter emerges from it. He's inverting the hierarchy entirely. He's inverting the hierarchy entirely. Consciousness comes first, matter emerges from it. This is radical coming from Planck specifically because he's the father of quantum. Consciousness comes first, matter emerges from it. Wow. Again, chicken and egg. Did we first have consciousness and then that consciousness suddenly made human being? Or first we had human beings and then suddenly there was one day when you just like injected consciousness into them. Wow. This is radical coming from Planck, specifically because he's the father of quantum theory, the man who discovered energy quantization in 1900 and essentially launched modern physics. He's not speaking from ignorance of the physical world. He's speaking from having gone as deep into it as anyone could and finding that at the bottom, the physical world doesn't explain itself. What drove him to this? A few things. The measurement problem kept haunting quantum physics. The fact that you can't describe a quantum system's behavior without referencing an observer. The math itself seems to require consciousness as an ingredient, not an afterthought. What drove him to this? A few things. The measurement problem kept haunting quantum physics. The measurement problem kept haunting quantum physics. The measurement problem kept haunting quantum physics. The fact that you can describe a quantum system's behavior without referencing an observer. The math itself seems to require consciousness as an ingredient, not an afterthought. Planck looked at this and concluded that consciousness isn't something that the universe accidentally produced after billions of years of evolution. It's woven into the fabric from the start. The math itself seems to require consciousness as an ingredient, not an afterthought. Isn't something the universe accidentally produced after billions of years of evolution. It's woven into the fabric from the start. He's essentially saying you can explain matter in terms of consciousness, but you cannot explain consciousness in terms of matter. You can explain matter in terms of consciousness, but you cannot explain consciousness in terms of matter. Try it. Try to describe what it's like to experience the color red using only equations about wavelengths and neural firing patterns. You will describe everything about it without ever touching the experience itself. That gap is what Planck is pointing at. This maps almost perfectly onto the Vedantic position you already know well. Satchitanand, Chit consciousness as one of the fundamental attributes of Brahman, not as something that evolved out of Jad, inert matter. Jad means root. Chit as one of the fundamental attributes of Brahman, not as something that evolved out of Jad. Schrödinger read the Upanishads and arrived at the same conclusion. Chit as one of the fundamental attributes of Brahman and not as something that evolved out of Jad. Schrödinger read the Upanishads and arrived at the same conclusion independently. Planck arrived at it from the physics itself. The practical implication is destabilizing. If consciousness is fundamental, then your inner life isn't a side effect of biology. Your awareness isn't riding on top of reality. It's participating in constituting it, which changes what it means to set a goal, direct attention, or build a tool that shifts how people see. The practical implication is destabilizing. If consciousness is fundamental, then your inner life isn't a side effect of biology. Your awareness isn't riding on top of reality. It's participating in constituting it, which changes what it means to set a goal. Direct attention, or build a tool that shifts how people see. Schrödinger's relationship with Vedantic philosophy is one of the most fascinating and underappreciated stories in the history of science. Late 20s, 30s, Schrödinger began reading the Upanishads and Vedantic texts largely through the influence of Arthur Schopenhauer. I was gonna say that Schrödinger and Schopenhauer, we created this entire creative lineage of the Upanishads, and that was very cool. Claude did an amazing job, and it feels weird. It feels like you have to say that Claude did an amazing job, as if it's like Claude is your employee and you have to kind of give them credit, because you're like, no, I didn't do it, Claude did it, so I gotta give my credits where the credit's due. So yeah, anyways, Claude did it, obviously. And it was really cool to see that Schopenhauer. I found Schopenhauer during my last trip to Montreal, and I'm just like, I was like really into philosophy. I was really reading about philosophy and stuff, and I come across Schopenhauer, and Schopenhauer was very famous to say that he didn't want to marry. He was talking about the will. He was talking about that how, yeah, that stuff can disturb the work that is important. Wow. Began reading the Upanishads and Vedantic texts largely through the influence of Arthur Schopenhauer, who himself had been deeply shaped by early European translations of Indian philosophy. Then the moment I read Schrödinger, I thought about Schopenhauer. Wow. Who himself had been deeply shaped by early European translations of Indian philosophy. Schopenhauer once called the Upanishads the consolation of my life and will be the consolation of my death. Schopenhauer once called the Upanishads the consolation of my life. He called the Upanishads as the consolation of my life and will be the consolation of my death. Schrödinger picked up that thread and ran with it far further than Schopenhauer ever did. Schrödinger began reading the Upanishads and Vedantic texts largely through the influence of Arthur Schopenhauer, who himself had been deeply shaped by... I have an idea, wow. Began reading the Upanishads and Vedantic texts largely through the influence of Arthur Schopenhauer, who himself had been deeply shaped by early European translations of Indian philosophy. Schopenhauer once called the Upanishads the consolation of my life and will be the consolation of my death. I don't know what that means, consolation. What does consolation mean? Or actually, what did Schopenhauer mean by the Upanishads are consolation of my life? The core structure of existence is suffering, because reality at its root is will, a blind, ceaseless striving that never reaches final satisfaction. Desire, brief pleasure, boredom, new desire, repeat forever. No progress narrative, no cosmic justice. No ultimate meaning baked into the universe. For most people, the insight leads to despair. What the Upanishads gave him. What the Upanishads. Wow, these photos are beautiful. These photos are beautiful. Like, this is amazing. You gotta preserve this. Wow. I wanted my cover to look like that. The Upanishads offered Schopenhauer something radically different from Western religion and optimism, a metaphysical exit. They said the suffering self, ego, individual will is not ultimate. The sense of separateness is a cognitive illusion. At the deepest level, Atman is Brahman. The individual self and the universal ground are identical. Liberation doesn't come from fixing the world, but from seeing through the illusion of individuality. To Schopenhauer, this was an Eastern mysticism. It was the only metaphysics that fully matched his pessimism without collapsing into nihilism. The suffering of self is not ultimate. The sense of separateness is a cognitive illusion. Maya. At the deepest level, Atman is Brahman. The individual self and the universal ground are identical. Why he called them consolation? Consolation doesn't mean comfort here, it means release. Yes, life as ego is suffering. Yes, desire is the engine of pain, you're right. But no, this isn't the final truth of reality. There is a standpoint beyond striving, beyond will, beyond individuality. But no, this isn't the final truth of reality. Yes, life as ego is suffering. Yes, desire is the engine of pain. But no, this isn't the final truth of reality. There is a standpoint beyond striving, beyond will, beyond individuality. In his words, they showed him that the world is not to be affirmed, but to be understood and transcended. Life as ego is suffering. Desire is the engine of pain. But no, this isn't the final truth of reality. There is a standpoint beyond striving, beyond will, beyond individuality. In his words, they showed him that the world is not to be affirmed, but to be understood and transcended. That's why he read them nightly before bed. That's why he said they would console him at death. They gave him a metaphysical peace that Western philosophy never did. Schopenhauer arrived at this bleak worldview independently through ruthless rational analysis. Then he discovered that the Indian sages had diagnosed the same problem: suffering, desire, illusion, and provided a cleaner metaphysical resolution. Deepest truth of existence had already been articulated thousands of years ago. It was profoundly humbling to him. He wasn't converting, he was recognizing intellectual honesty. Call the Upanishads, he meant. They told me that my suffering was not a mistake and that my individuality was not ultimate. What did Schopenhauer find peace in? But by stepping out of its grip, seeing through the illusion of individuality. Most suffering comes from taking the individual self too seriously. He believed the ego, me, my life, my success is a surface phenomenon. Beneath it is a single impersonal metaphysical force. When you identify less with the individual will, suffering loosens. Mattered so much to him. They didn't promise happiness, they dissolved the need for it. Peace came from de-identification, not gratification. Aesthetic contemplation, temporary relief. Schopenhauer noticed something subtle. When absorbed in art, music, or nature, people momentarily forget themselves. In those moments, desire pauses. Art, music, nature, people momentarily forget themselves. Desire pauses. The will quiets. Consciousness becomes impersonal. He especially valued music, which he thought bypassed concepts entirely and spoke directly to the structure of reality. I was literally about to play the music. Amazing. He especially valued music, which he thought bypassed concepts entirely and spoke directly to the structure of reality. This wasn't permanent peace, but it was a preview of it. Compassion, only for a pessimist. Schopenhauer believed compassion was ethically central. Okay, right now it's getting distracted. So we'll pause that. I believe compassion was ethically central. Why? Because when you feel another's suffering as your own, the illusion of separateness weakens. Compassion wasn't moral virtue for him, it was metaphysical insight. Recognition that the same will lives in all beings. That recognition softened his view of the world. When you feel another suffering as your own, the illusion of separateness weakens. Compassion was a moral virtue for him, it was metaphysical insight. Renunciation, quieting the will. The deepest peace for Schopenhauer came from reducing desire itself. Not ascetic misery, but modest living. Intellectual solitude, low expectations. Low expectations. Modest living. Modest living. Intellectual solitude. Low expectations. Withdrawal from ambition, status, and hope. Hope to him was just desire stretched into the future. Peace meant wanting less because you understood more. Acceptance of suffering as structural. This might be the most important point. Schopenhauer didn't find peace by believing life would improve. He found peace by realizing suffering is not a personal failure, it's a feature of existence. Once suffering stopped being interpreted as something has gone wrong, it lost much of its sting. Acceptance of suffering as structural. Schopenhauer didn't find peace by believing life would improve. He found peace by realizing suffering is not a personal failure, it's a feature of existence. Schopenhauer found peace in disidentifying from the ego, suspending desire, recognizing unity beneath individuality, letting go of hope, not clinging to it, not joy, not optimism, not meaning, but lucidity without despair. Schrödinger began reading the Upanishads and Vedantic texts largely through the influence of artisan Schopenhauer. We read this. The key text in Schrödinger's 44 What is Life, and even more directly his later lectures and essays compiled in My View of the World. In these he doesn't just reference Vedanta casually, he commits to it as the most coherent metaphysical framework he's encountered. He writes, consciousness is a singular of which the plural is unknown. There is only one thing, and that which seems to be a plurality is merely a series of different aspects of this one thing. Consciousness is a singular. Consciousness is a singular of which the plural is unknown. There is only one thing, and that which seems to be a plurality is merely a series of different aspects of this one thing. He's basically saying that, okay, consciousness is singular, of which plural is unknown. There's only one thing, and that which seems to be a plurality is merely a series of different aspects of this one thing. This pure Advait, a Vedanta, and non-dual teaching that individual consciousness, Atman, and universal consciousness, Brahman, are identical. The Chandogya, the Chandogya Upanishad, Tattvamasi, thou art that, is essentially what Tattvamasi, what Schrödinger is restating in Western philosophical language. He was even more explicit elsewhere. The multiplicity is not apparent. This is the doctrine of the Upanishads, and not of the Upanishads only. The mystical experience of the union with God regularly leads to this view. The multiplicity is only apparent. This is the doctrine of the Upanishads, and not of the Upanishads only. The mystical experience of the union with God, the mystical experience of the union with God regularly leads to this view. This is the doctrine of the Upanishads. What makes this so extraordinary is the reason he was drawn to it. What is life? There has to be a way to remember all of these, so I want to read Schrödinger's 1944 book, What is Life, and his essays compiled in my view of the world. Yeah, Claude, remember this as action item. What makes this so extraordinary? Actually, what are the key ideas from Schrödinger's book, What is Life? Boom. It wasn't spiritual tourism. He had a genuine physics problem. Quantum physics kept showing him that individuals, separate, isolated entities were a friction, entanglement which he himself named. Wow. I think it's Vairagya, and he just made a German version of Vairagya. Demonstrated that particles that have interacted can't be described independently anymore. Separateness breaks down the fundamental level. Verschrankung. Shrang Vairagya, that's like German Vairagya, okay. Demonstrated that particles that have interacted can't be described independently anymore. Wow. Separateness breaks down at the fundamental level. Separateness breaks down at the fundamental level. He looked at this result and recognized what the Upanishadic rishis had been saying for 3,000 years. The appearance of multiplicity is Maya, not illusion in the trivial sense, but a misperception of what's actually an undivided whole. He looked at this result and recognized what the Upanishadic rishis had been saying for 3,000 years. The appearance of multiplicity is Maya. The appearance of multiplicity is Maya. Not illusion in the trivial sense, but a misperception of what's actually an undivided whole. He also grappled seriously with the hard problem of consciousness decades before David Chalmers gave it a name. His conclusion was that consciousness is not produced by the brain the way bile is produced by the liver. Instead, consciousness is the ground, and the multiplicity of individual minds is an appearance within it. Exactly as Shankara's Advait Vedanta teaches. Conscious Chit, Sat, Chit, Anand. Consciousness is the ground, and the multiplicity of individual minds is an appearance within it. Wow. Okay, what if I go to Grok and I get it to imagine this? Wow. It did something. Swirling vortex symbolizing consciousness with human figures in starry sky conveying unity. Consciousness as the ground. Consciousness is the ground, and the multiplicity of individual minds is an appearance within it. The irony is beautiful. Wow. Consciousness is the ground. Multiplicity of individual minds is an appearance within it. Wow. 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 Like very grok fashion. Wow. Consciousness is the ground. Multiplicity of individual minds. Multiplicity of individual minds is an appearance within it. Grok is getting so good at these photos, and I think this is it. Like, you can start imagining the realities. It would be so cool to pick up quotes and just plant it over here. Consciousness is the ground. Wow. Multiplicity of the individual minds. Is an appearance within it. Wow. Some of these images are really sick. It's like very inspired from Mid-Journey. Okay. Let's go back. What's the first version it did? Consciousness is the ground, multiplicity of individual minds is an appearance within it. Why is it showing me like individual? Yes, now we're getting into some consciousness layer. The font is very much like one of those templated versions. Okay, okay. This is cool. This is interesting. Okay. What if I only do consciousness? More. Translucent human head with Schrödinger light pattern symbolizing consciousness and a dreamlike atmosphere. Wow. Grok is getting really good. Grok is getting really good. Wow. A blurred human figure in a dark abstract background symbolizing consciousness in a surreal style. Wow. Wow. You can make so much art now. I like this one. If you just search up consciousness, I think it's gonna give you Really good stuff. Solitary figure, mystery, ethereal environment, evoking consciousness, surreal light shadows. Oh my god. So, dreamlike landscape, exploring consciousness, dreamlike landscape. Meditative pose, symbolizing consciousness, reflection in dark ethereal background. Meditative pose. Grog is really fast. Evoking introspection. I love photos like this with a lot of motion blur. Grok, imagine, is so fast. It didn't show up over there. Wow. Okay. This was really cool. Really cool. Wow. He also grappled seriously with the hard problem of consciousness decades before David Chalmers. Wow. His conclusion was that consciousness is not produced by the brain. Exactly, Shankara's Advaita Vedanta teaches. The irony is beautiful. One of the architects of the most mathematically rigorous theory in the history of science concluded that the ultimate nature of reality is better described by ancient Sanskrit texts than by his own equations. For your work, there's a deep provocation here. Schrödinger didn't see Eastern philosophy and Western science as complementary perspectives that could be bridged. He saw them as pointing at the same thing from different angles. And he thought the Upanishads got there first with greater clarity. Your philosophical instruments aren't bridging two separate domains, they are working in the space where those domains were never actually separate. But more sacred complex quotes. Okay. Philosophical. Wow. These ones would be really cool. But okay. I think I need a break. The whole number of minds in the universe is one. The whole number of minds in the universe is one. Is a singular of which a plural is unknown. There is only one thing, and that which seems to be plurality is merely a series of different aspects of this one thing produced by deception. The Indian Maya. It's merely a series of different aspects of this one thing produced by deception. Maya. You don't have to call it Indian Maya, you can just call it Maya. Indian Maya. Quotes. Schrödinger. Where is it? This one? Yes. Erwin Schrödinger. Oh no. SCHRO4 Dinger. Maya. Let's just call it Maya. There is no kind of framework within which we can find consciousness in the plural. This is simply something we construct because of the temporal plurality of individuals, but it is a false construction. The only solution to this conflict, insofar as any is available to us at all, lies in the ancient wisdom of the Upanishad. On Vedanta directly, Vedanta teaches that consciousness is singular. All happenings are played out in one universal consciousness, and there is no multiplicity of selves. The mystical experience of the union with God regularly leads to this view, unless strong prejudices stand in the West. The unity and continuity of Vedanta are reflected in the unity and continuity of wave mechanics. This is entirely consistent with the Vedanta concept of all is one. From the early great Upanishads, the recognition Atman Brahman, the personal self equals the omnipresent, all-comprehending, eternal self was in Indian thought considered far from being blasphemous to represent the quintessence of deepest insight into the happenings of the world. Consciousness cannot be accounted for in physical terms. Consciousness is absolutely fundamental. It cannot be accounted for in terms of anything else. A perceiving self is nowhere to be found in the world picture, because it itself is the world picture. On the limits of science, whence came I and whither go I? That is the great unfathomable question, the same for every one of us. Science has no answer to it. Science cannot tell us a word about why music delights us, of why and how an old song can move us to tears. The material world has only been constructed at the price of taking the self, that is the mind, out of it, removing it. Mind is not part of it, obviously. Therefore, it can neither act on it nor be acted on by any of its parts. Nirvana is a state of pure blissful knowledge. It has nothing to do. Nirvana, 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 nirvana. It is not nirvana, nothing to do with the individual. The ego or its separation is an illusion. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. We cannot get behind consciousness. Everything that we talk about, everything that we regard as existing, postulates consciousness. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force, which brings the particle of an atom to vibration and holds this most minute solar system of the atom together. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. Science cannot solve the ultimate mystery of nature, and that is because in the last analysis we ourselves are a part of the mystery that we are trying to solve. What we observe is not nature itself, but nature exposed to our method of questioning. The atoms or elementary particles themselves are not real. They form a world of potentialities or possibilities. We must be clear that when it comes to atoms, language can be used only as in poetry. The poet, too, is not nearly so concerned with describing facts as with creating images and establishing mental connections. Wow. Wow. Not nearly concerned with describing facts as with creating images and establishing mental connections. Physics is not about how the world is, it is about what we can say about the world. Physics is to be regarded not so much as the study of something a priori given, but rather as a development of methods of ordering and surveying human experience. Physics is to be regarded not so much as the study of something a priori given, but rather as the development of methods of ordering and surveying human experience. I myself find the division of the world into an objective and a subjective side much too arbitrary. The fact that religions through the ages have spoken in images, parables, and paradoxes means simply that there are no other ways of grasping the reality to which they refer, but that does not mean that that is not a genuine reality, and splitting this reality into an objective and subjective side won't get us very far. How wonderful that we have met with the paradox. Now we have some hope of making progress. Wolfgang Pauli. It would be most satisfactory of all if physics and psyche, that is matter and mind, could be seen as complementary aspects of the same reality. Okay, we'll read this more later. But this has been incredible. Perking DNA before it was discovered. Life is rebellion against decay, not just order from disorder, order from order, negative entropy. Why are atoms so small? Mutations as quantum jumps, consciousness, free will, Vedanta. Oh my god, alright, that's it.